We are live on a Monday. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And, of course, we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. You out there, what's up, everybody? We got a busy show for you today. We are now 2 weeks from the draft, less than 2 weeks from the draft. We had a busy weekend, got some draft conversation for you throughout the course of the day. Always like your draft questions throughout the show. We are busy today, jam-packed, but the first hour, it's just you and I as we take a look at what I feel should be a pretty interesting and entertaining Sixers game, unless the NBA goes and NBA's this game, which is likely. Ben Simmons is on the questionable list, along with Tobias Harris and a couple others. Steph Curry, also questionable to play tonight for the Warriors. I got into an interesting conversation with a buddy of mine who we'll talk to tonight in the 5 o'clock hour about Steph Curry and Joel Embiid, who on Saturday night, the two of those guys went bananas. The two of them were just going back and forth and back and forth. They weren't playing against each other. Curry just had an absolutely bonkers game. And then Joel Embiid, of course, just absolutely, I guess it was Friday night. Just absolutely, was it Friday or Saturday night? It was Friday night, right? The Sixers played the Clippers. The Clippers played the Sixers Friday. The Warriors played on Saturday. But Embiid in his last 4 games has just absolutely been the most dominating presence in all of the NBA. And Steph Curry, I should say, look, I'm not taking anything away. He's probably the best shooter that we've ever seen. He is probably right now playing at one of the best levels that he's ever played at, considering he's 33 years old and he's doing this. But when we're talking about the dominance of a player, both of these guys are just completely different. They're doing it in completely different manners. You know, my buddy texted me and says, Curry, and he says, most electrifying player in the NBA. Second place is not even close. And I responded, well, his team is 500. He didn't like that answer, right? And he said, yeah, it's just him. You just proved my point. I said, go watch Embiid play. It's way more fun, and they're actually good. So that started a little bit of back and forth there. Look, Curry's great. I love watching Curry. He's so much fun. But I enjoy watching Joel Embiid's doing more. That was my point. I just think watching Joel Embiid is just such a difference-making thing. He is just so different than any player that I can't come up with a guy that is comparable that I've ever watched to Joel Embiid. Have you guys out there? Nothing like Curry's amazing, by the way. You know, he had 47 points the other night against Boston. They lost the game, by the way, but he was 15 of 27. He was 11 of 19 from 3-point range. He has 30 points or more in 10 straight games, and he turned his ankle in that game, and he is, questionable for the game tonight, which kind of stinks. I mean, watching Embiid against Curry tonight, these are probably the two most opposite superstars that the NBA could put out on the court. You have the big man against this generational shooter. They both are dominating the game in such different manners right now. How about this? Embiid in his last 7 games, 30 points. He's shooting 47% from the field, 11 free throws made per game, and almost 2 blocks. Curry, by the way, in his last 7 games is going for 40 points. He's shooting 57%, and he's hitting 52% of three-pointers. And by the way, he's throwing in 5 extra assists per game, which is unbelievable. So throughout the day, I have some stats on these two guys that are just going to be eye-opening the way they're playing. Joel Embiid, by the way, over his last 4 games has just been absolutely incredible. By the way, too, Joel Embiid for the season. Now, Steph Curry is averaging 31 points per game. 31 points per game for Steph Curry this year. It's awesome. It's unbelievable. Now, Curry, as good as he has been, has never averaged, I take that back. He averaged 30 points a game a couple of years ago. But this would be the highest points per game that Curry has ever averaged. But we don't even realize this. I don't think we do anyway. Joel Embiid is actually now, think about this. Joel Embiid is now averaging 30 points per game. 30 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and a block and a half is Joel Embiid. It is simply, what these two guys are doing is simply on another level. And I hope that we get the opportunity to see them go up against each other tonight. But I don't know that that's going to happen. Curry is questionable. And I could go out and say, yeah, I think Steph Curry might be the greatest shooter that we've ever seen. But right now, these two guys could be the most fun of all the players to watch in the NBA. Do you like Curry, the shooter, or Embiid? I don't even know what to call Embiid, the unicorn. I don't know what you call him. I mean, I remember Porzingis was a unicorn, but he's never on the court. Joel Embiid, I can't come up with a comparable player to Joel Embiid. Anybody got one for me? I mean, I'm not saying that Curry's very comparable either, but I can say, yeah, there's a lot of guys who shoot the ball, and I don't know that any of them shoot it at the level of what Curry does, but, you know, Reggie Miller was an amazing shooter back in the 90s. I think Curry is definitely a better all-around player than Reggie Miller was. But Miller was that, like, dynamic shooter that just got streaky hot. He could bang, like, you know, the famous game against the Knicks where he scored all those points. Miller reminds me a little bit of Curry, like where he's a guy that shoots, but Curry's better than Miller. I'm just saying. When I was trying to think of another guy who was comparable to Curry, Curry's better than Miller, but he's the guy that I think of, you know, just one of those guys, like when Reggie Miller was going, he was unstoppable. I can't think of a guy like Embiid, though. I just can't come up with a guy. You know, he's got the size of Shaq, but the skill set of about 3 or 4 different guys that come to mind. I mean, everybody will say Olajuwon when they think of Joel Embiid, and he's got the little dream shake in his arsenal, and he's got the ability to do a lot of stuff that like Patrick Ewing did. He hits the elbow jumpers with regularity. He'll hit the baseline jumper. He hits the foul line extended jumper. I mean, Embiid's got a little bit of offense from everybody. He kind of takes, and now he's even adding, you know, if you watch him the other night against the Dallas Mavericks, he added in a little Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway shot. I mean, how are you going to stop Joel Embiid if he starts hitting that thing with regularity? So I'm asking you guys out there today, these are right now what I think are the 2 most fun players to watch, right? I'm not saying that Curry's better or Embiid's better. I'm not saying that at all. I'm asking, I think they're the most fun guys to watch. If I'm saying to a guy who's never watched the NBA before, hey, you want to watch a game? Watch these 2 guys. You might turn into a fan. I don't know that there's anybody higher on the list. Is there? You might be a Curry guy. You might be an Embiid guy. But is there anybody higher on the list than those 2 guys that you would say, you've never watched an NBA game before, watch these 2 guys, and you're going to fall in love with this game? I think right now they're 1 and 2. They're the 2nd and 3rd leading scorers in the league. Bradley Beal, by the way, is number 1. Who would have guessed that? There's some other numbers on Embiid, and we talked about on Friday's show why I think Joel Embiid should be the MVP of the league. And I don't even think it's really all that debatable at this point. If you watch him on Friday night and you have to question whether or not Joel Embiid should be the MVP of the league, I mean, come on, man. I tweeted this out over the weekend. Giving the MVP to anybody else other than Joel Embiid is essentially like giving the Rookie of the Year to Malcolm Brogdon that year. You're just going to have a completely tainted version of the MVP, essentially because you said, well, Joel Embiid missed 18 games, which some of it, by the way, was COVID related, no fault of his own. Some of it was contact tracing stuff. So it really wasn't his fault that he missed the games. It's different if he missed 18 games with a knee problem or a back problem or an ankle problem. Some of the games, in fact, the majority of the games that he missed earlier in the season were because of COVID-related stuff. But think about this with Joel Embiid. He leads the NBA in winning percentage this year. Joel Embiid, when he plays this year, the Sixers are 30-8. 30-8. And in those games, he averages 30 points per game. It would be the third highest scoring average in a season by the leader in win percentage. And every other person has won the MVP. In other words, when Joel Embiid played, his team was the best, and he averaged 30 points per game. The only other guys, Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Larry Bird. And every single one of them won the MVP. Embiid has missed 18 games this season. Now, on the flip side of that, the only player to win the MVP while missing that many games is Bill Walton. He missed 24 games in 77 and 78 during that season. Now, Allen Iverson won an MVP award missing 11 games back in 2000, 2001. So there's not a lot of precedence for what Joel Embiid would do here, missing 18 games and winning the MVP. Bill Walton did it. Now, I'd like to see who else was in the running for the MVP that year, or was it just like there's really not another guy? Because Joel Embiid, to me, that's similar this year. I don't know that there's another guy. You want to try to, people keep trying to force feed Nikola Jokic to me. I love Jokic. Huge fan. But he's not the MVP of the league. I'm sorry. To say that he's the MVP of the league right now is just trying to find a way to not give it to Joel Embiid. It feels very much like, let's give the Rookie of the Year to Malcolm Brogdon because Joel Embiid missed too many games. Come on. Now, tonight, you got Curry, who is questionable with the ankle injury, and he's averaging 31 points a game. Realistically, he's having one of the best seasons that he's ever had, but you don't hear anybody talking about him for the MVP. Why? Because Golden State's simply not in the playoff race. I mean, they're in the playoff race. They're not in the title picture. I think if Jokic can keep the Denver Nuggets in that 4 spot, and if he can get them up to 3, that's his path to victory. Or it would make me feel better, put it that way, because I think people are going to vote for him. Tim Bontemps did a straw poll of 101 NBA executives, GMs, writers, etc. And in that straw poll, it was a runaway for Jokic. So it seems likely right now that he would win the MVP, and second in that was Joel Embiid. So my point is this. If he's going to be second, you can vote for him to be first. If you're going to tell me you believe he's second, numerically and team-wise, he's clearly the better guy. So if he's going to be second, he could be first. Now, Bill Walton won the MVP that year. This is interesting. He averaged 19 points, 13 rebounds, and 5 assists, plus 2.5 blocks. George Gervin was second, and he averaged 27 points a game. David Thompson averaged 27. Kareem averaged 25 and 12. So it wasn't like there were guys who didn't have good numbers. They did have good numbers. So I'm interested to know what happened back then when Bill Walton, who missed all those games, was still considered the best player. Now, Kareem missed a bunch of games. He missed 20 games that season. But the other two guys, Gervin played all 82. David Thompson played 80. So what did Bill Walton do that stood out so significantly that made people feel, wow, he was clearly the MVP, even though he missed 24 games? That's an interesting one. But to me, if you are a straw poll and you are voting and you're saying Joel Embiid is second, if he's going to be number 2, you're telling me that you think legitimately that Jokic has been better than him? Come on, you're better than that, everybody. You voters, you're better than that. But those guys, to me, are the most fun. Right now, Curry and Embiid. There's very limited tickets for games. If I could buy a ticket, tonight would be one of them. Embiid versus Curry. Now, I don't know that Curry's playing. He's questionable. 609-403-0973. The text board, 609-403-0973. James Beeman's watching on Facebook. Embiid is my guy, but let's be clear. Steph doesn't need space to be great like Joel. Curry is the most electrifying player right now. He's must-see TV. Yeah, Curry is the greatest shooter that I think I've ever seen. He just catches, the release is so ridiculously fast. And I've said before, while I'm a big fan of Curry, I don't put him in the same category as the LeBrons and the Durants as the guy who can win a title for you by himself. In other words, the best player on the best team. I think those Golden State teams where you had 2 to 3 or 4 guys when you had Durant there. The one team that didn't have Durant that won, Curry was the best player on the best team. So he has done it before, but I also felt that team also had a ton of talent, but that's not taking anything away from him. He was the best player on the team that won a championship, but I don't feel at this stage that Curry is in that same spot as LeBron and those guys. But this Warriors team that they have now, Curry, Wiggins, Oubre, and Draymond, it's just an average team. Wiggins has been a total disappointment. He doesn't stink, but he's been a total disappointment. Oubre's been in and out of the lineup. Draymond's, not the same player that he was. Not having Clay there. If they have Klay Thompson on this team this year, they could possibly be in the top 4. I don't think they're a championship team. But it should be fun. We'll see if Curry plays tonight. We'll keep our eyes on that. The Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right, so doing a little research on this, Josh. Portland had the better record that season. So it's essentially what's going on with the Sixers. They said Walton's team was the best. Let's give it to him. Even though those other guys had better numbers, they had a better record. Well, to me, Joel Embiid has the best numbers, and he's on the best team. That's the difference. 609-403-0973. Text board open. More of your, if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, send your comments over, and we will continue to. Yes, Dominic, I do remember. Remember when winless for Wiggins was a thing? Imagine the ping pong balls bouncing and the Sixers pick Wiggins or Parker over Embiid. That would have been disastrous. I say, the best thing that happened that year, the Sixers tanked, of course, but they didn't get the number 1 pick. Who knows? Would they have taken Joel Embiid with the number 1 overall pick? Or would they have followed suit and gone winless for Wiggins? Because if you remember, they already had Nerlens Noel on their team. They had drafted him the year before. So, and I feel like they would have likely gone the Wiggins route, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't really remember winless for Wiggins, but I think as it got closer, people thought Embiid was the best player, but he had the back problem that left him out. He did not play in the tournament. If you remember at Kansas, he didn't play in the Big 12 tournament. He didn't play in the NCAA tournament. He had this back problem. And that was the reason why teams passed on him, which I thought was ridiculous. I remember doing shows at that time like, you don't pass on this guy because, he had like the foot injury. You don't pass on this guy when you're that bad of a team. The Sixers were the one team that said, I don't need him right now. I don't care if he plays this year. That was the underrated part about what the Sixers did was they didn't make mistakes because they were impatient. The Cleveland Cavaliers could have picked Joel Embiid, but they wanted to try to win 28 games, which is ridiculous. All right, 609-403-0973. Crank them up. Texas board is open. We are busy today. Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers. Mosher for football at 4. Bob Wankel on the Phillies weekend. I'm going to get into Nola. Geoff Kerr is back. Jeff's going to start doing a couple days a week. We're going to talk football with Geoff in the 5 o'clock hour, 3 days a week now. There's just so much football to discuss, and I think Geoff does a really good job. He's a national writer with a local perspective. He covers the Eagles, covers the whole league. So Geoff will join me at 5:25 tonight. This is the Sports Bash. We are live on a Monday. Just getting started. Call Jenkins for heating, air conditioning, installation, service, and maintenance for drain cleaning service. 609-641-6440 or JenkinsPlumbingHeating.com. I want to get into the Phillies. I got NFL win totals. I've got Sixers, Warriors. This is a busy day. I got more numbers on Joel Embiid and Curry that you need to stick around for. Wait till you hear some of the numbers. I don't think people realize what Curry's doing this year either, but I don't think you realize how good Embiid has been this year. Are we taking him for granted? Sports Bash. All right, welcome back. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the day. Apparently it's raining now, and I didn't know that. I just was told that. So be safe if you're out there driving. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The free mobile app. You can download the mobile app for Sports Bash Cash coming up at 255, 355, 455, 555, 655. Sports Bash Cash code words. They're worth $1,000 each. If you are randomly selected, you will win $1,000. The person who gets selected for the grand prize randomly could win $10,000. The more you play, the more entries you have. Sports Bash Cash, 55 after the hour, every day from 9:55 to 6:55. And that's from our friends at Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union. All right, a lot of texts coming in. Jalen is watching on YouTube, says, Mike, Lillard is very comparable to Curry statistically, probably more athletic, but a little behind on the threes. Yeah, Dame Lillard's another one of those guys that could shoot it from anywhere. I think Curry has a little bit, obviously he's a better three-point shooter than Dame. I think Dame's a little stronger, taking the ball to the basket. Curry, one of the problems that he's had over the years is he's a little small, a little frail, so he doesn't like to take the ball to the basket as much. That's not a knock on him to say that he's not as good at it. He's a better shooter. So you have two players who I think are very, very, very talented. One of them, Curry, the shooter, and the other one, Lillard, I think Lillard actually has a better overall all-around game. It's just that Curry is just that much better of a shooter than Lillard. That's how good Curry is that he's that much better of a shooter than Dame Lillard is. But I think as an overall game, like just the total package, Dame Lillard might be just a better overall all-around player, but he's just not as good of a shooter. And that's a big difference. That's a big deal. Like Lillard's 37% from three. Almost 40. He's 37.9. Or almost 38, I should say. Whereas you have, and I think if you look at Curry, I mean, Lillard shoots 10 threes a game. Curry shoots 12. He's 42% from three, and that's a big difference. He's making an extra three per game. He shoots two extra. And look, Dame Lillard has been on a team that's been to the Western Conference Finals, and they haven't been able to get past that. Their comp, that's a decent one. I mean, that's a good one, Jalen. I would take Curry over Dame, but it's not even to say that like Dame Lillard's an unbelievable player. By the way, like I said, I think you could make an argument that Lillard is actually a more well-rounded player. I think the two things is the shooting. I mean, Lillard's just not as good as a shooter, and it's not. Now Jonathan says the difference is you can win a championship with Steph being a number one. You will never win a championship with Lillard being the number one guy. And why is that though? That's a point. See, and I've been one of those guys. Like I think Steph Curry. I don't know that you win the championship with him being your number one guy. And I know people would say, well, he already did. The year that they didn't have Durant and they won, I think you can make an argument that Curry and Clay were like 1 and 1As, which isn't a knock on Curry. Like you can win the championship with Curry. I just feel like to win it again, they had to, like people said, well, they didn't need Durant. They did need Durant. In the end, they did need Durant. Those teams probably don't win those championships unless they get Durant. They got two more, and they needed every bit of Durant in both of those championships. So, yeah, I'm not really 100% sure. I think it's a really interesting conversation. Like Steph Curry and Dame Lillard are very comparable type of players, but what separates those two players that has Curry in the finals and has Lillard coming up short? Because I take either one of those guys. Yeah, I know. They won 72 games. I got it. That year, like they had everything going. They had the best version of Curry, they had the best version of Clay, and they had the best version of Draymond. Those three guys were their best in the season that they won 72 games. Those guys were playing the best they ever played. Well, you can make an argument that Curry's playing his best right now, but as a trio, those three guys that season, what was that, the 15 season? Right? Golden State in 2015-16, I want to say that was the year that those three guys, I think it was 14-15, right? I think those three guys in the 14-15 season, no, it was the next year they won 72 games. Did they win the title that year?
No, that's the year LeBron won in 7.
It was, yeah, so it was 15-16. They didn't win the title the year they won 72 games, though.
Correct.
All right, give me a little 73 games, by the way, they won.
Yeah, the way it broke down was they won the NBA title the year before.
The year before.
And
Right.
then,
That's the year that I'm talking about. Was
right.
The year before in 15, that was the year that I think the three of them played collectively
out of their minds.
Their best three. They've had their best seasons all collectively in the same year that year.
Right.
You could say, well, they won 72
at the same time.
Yeah, they won 72 the next year. They didn't win the title that year.
Right. They didn't win the year they won all those games, but the year before was the first year that Steph kind of stepped into the spotlight and Clay and Draymond were right behind him.
Yeah.
You could say.
Yeah, I mean, that was the year that really Clay, you can make an argument that I don't want to say nobody, but not a lot of people really knew of him and who he was. And that year it was, whoa, this guy's really good.
The other thing that made Clay so special was he was such a great defender. He was the guy that when you played, for example, OKC, it was him and Draymond going mano-a-mano with Russ and Durant on the defensive side, letting Steph have a little more energy on the offensive end of the floor.
Right, because if you remember the year before, they won 51 games. They were like a middle of the packer, and they just kind of the next year after that, I think, like Clay that year, Clay Thompson in, what was that, the 13-14 season, I guess that would be?
It's 14-15 is the year that they won the title.
Right. No, I'm saying, but the year before that, when they won 51 games.
The last Mark Jackson year.
He scored like 18 points a game. Then the next year is when he kind of took off.
When he exploded.
And he kind of became, this next level player.
Because remember, they were doing all this before they ever got Kevin Durant. Durant was an add-on after LeBron won.
Well, he was the add-on after the 72 win season.
Right. Because the thing was that they won the 73 games, and it was like, but we couldn't beat LeBron. So that's when they all got on that airplane, went to KD's place in what was it, somewhere in New York. What was that place called again? You remember?
No.
Where he was vacationing?
No.
The Hamptons. He was in the Hamptons.
Gotcha.
They all got on a plane.
Right, because the year they won the title.
The first year.
The first year they won the title. Now, again, this is where it gets a little wonky because they won the title that year with Curry, and people are like, "See, yeah, he could be the best team that wins it." But that was the year that LeBron was playing with his merry men.
Right,
they had all the injuries.
Right, there was Timothy Mozgov in him.
Correct. That was probably the weakest of all the LeBron teams that he went to the finals with. That may have been the worst because of the injuries. They lost Kyrie. They lost Kevin Love.
I mean, it's close between that and the team that LeBron dragged to the finals versus the Spurs.
Yeah, but I mean, that incarnation, I'm saying, like, people are saying, well, Curry could be the best player on the team that won the championship. I don't know that they win that series if Kyrie and Love are playing. That was, what's his name? Dellavedova.
Yeah. I would point to the next year where people will say, well, how'd you go 7 games then with them? Because they won 7 games with them the next year, and the Cavs won in 7.
That's right.
But it took them 7 games to get it done.
Well, that was probably the best Warriors team. That 72-win Warriors team was probably the best one. The year before was the first year that all 3 of those guys really arrived, and then the next year they had that monster year, and then they lost in the finals,
Correct.
And then they went and got Durant.
Right.
So Curry did win a title as the best player on the team that won the championship.
And the next year they won 7 games with the best player on the planet.
That's right. And they beat that. But the title that they won where he was the best player on the best team was against the worst Cavs incarnation.
Right, during that LeBron run.
Yeah. But I'll ask you, and all these people are commenting, which player is more fun to watch, Curry or Embiid?
Personally,
because I say, like, I can't think of a comparison for Embiid. Like, I told my buddy the other night, and he's going to join us tonight, Todd Rank. Me and him were battling back and forth about this the other night. Todd. And I said that Embiid is Shaq, Olajuwon, Nowitzki, and somebody else all rolled into one.
I would say that he is a beautiful combination of Dirk, Hakeem, and Moses. Those are the three I would use.
Well, I say Shaq just because of his physical dominance. I think he has way more offensive depth than Shaq.
Well, that's why I go Moses instead of Shaq, because people forget how physically powerful Malone was.
Mm-hmm.
And Malone was Malone wasn't a thick guy. You know what I mean? He wasn't Shaq thick, but he was built like a brick house. And he would go into the post, and they talked about it in a couple of books I've read over the years about how Malone was the one guy Kareem was afraid of. He was the one guy that could neutralize the Kareem skyhook.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't let Kareem get that deep in the post.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, to me, it's a Moses Malone, Dirk Nowitzki, Hakeem Olajuwon hybrid animal is Embiid.
Now, Geoff in Summers Point adds Luka Doncic is very entertaining to watch, which you can add him to the mix. Yes.
As an all-around player.
He's entertaining. No, but that's what I asked. Who's the most fun to watch?
I mean, to me, my favorite guy to watch in the league right now is Damian Lillard. I love watching him. Okay. He's my favorite.
Yeah, see, I guess, and you don't see enough of him just because he's, they play late and they're not on all that much.
Well, I'm the idiot who's up late.
Yeah, so. But I'm saying, like, most people, I don't think, would give that answer. But
I'm also the guy who liked Dwayne Wade more than LeBron.
But see, like the game that Curry had the other night, I'm not saying that they're few and far between, but he doesn't have that game every single night of the week where he's got 11 3-pointers. And when he has a shooting night like that, that's a lot of fun. Embiid is like this almost every single time he plays this year, where he's just 30 points. He shoots elbow jumpers, fadeaways, 3-point shots, dunks in your face, shoots from the foul line, goes to you're watching 5 different guys in the same game.
I told you earlier that I feel like the thing that makes Embiid special this year, Mike, is that, and people can chime in as well and let me know what to think of this. I feel like every time the Embiid touches the ball, you expect him to score or do something special.
Well, and the Sixers need that because people keep saying, do they have a finisher? Do they have that guy late in the game? I don't know. Is Joel Embiid that guy late in the game that can get the bucket? Can he get a bucket from a variety of places? Because before it felt like, well, if you're good at, because they'll double him. Can he get through the double team? Does he, all that kind of stuff. It's a good conversation. Sixers Warriors tonight. I hope Curry plays. I want to see Embiid versus Curry tonight. Those two guys. Wait till you hear some of the numbers on these two guys and what they're doing this year. I got that coming up next. Brought to you by your Delaware Valley Acura dealers. For great deals on Acura's award-winning lineup, shop online at DelValAcuraDealers.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget the free mobile app. Download the app on your phone. It is free in the Apple Store or Google Play. And you can enter the Sports Bash cash code word coming up in 15 minutes. It's worth $1,000. All right, 245 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. 10 minutes from now, I have a Sports Bash Cash code word. It's worth $1,000, and possibly one lucky winner could win $10,000. The more words you enter, the more money you can win. It's pretty simple to do. 9:55, 10:55, 11:55. You get the gist. All the way to 6:55. I give you the Sports Bash Cash code word. You can enter it in multiple places on our website or on the free mobile app. For those of you who text in the Sports Bash Cash code word, that doesn't do anything for you. If you do text the word in, I typically will respond with the link to where to send it, but that's not an entry, just so you know that. What else? Oh, you can watch the show live. I see we have a pretty big audience watching the show today, and I hope that more people are finding out how to watch the show live. You can do it on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I think it really adds to the show. I appreciate everybody that is chatting in the show. Curry and Embiid, 2 and 3 in NBA scoring. Only one player has averaged 30 points a game at Curry's age. Michael Jordan did it, I think, in 95-96. The last center to average 30 points a game, which is where Embiid is right now. He just hit 30 after going bananas this last 4 games. The last center to average 30 points a game, you know what it was? 1981. Moses Malone. Believe that. It's the last time a center averaged 30 points a game. You're telling me Shaq never averaged 30 a night? Wow. This will be the first matchup between a point guard and a center when they average 29 or more points since 1973. Nate Tiny Archibald faced Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in that game. This is what we were supposed to watch tonight. Now, I don't know if Curry can hold up his end of the bargain. Now, in the last 10 games, Steph Curry has 391 points. It's the most in a 10-game span in his career. It's the most in a 10-game span by anyone 33 or older in NBA history. And it's the second most all-time in a 10-game span on 50-40-90. You know who the other guy was? Dame Lillard. So the guys who sent Dame Lillard in as the comparable, you guys are getting two points today. He has 10 straight 30-point games. They are tied for the longest streak in NBA history by a player 33 or older, Kobe Bryant, 2012. It's the longest streak by a Warriors player for 10 straight 30-point games since Wilt Chamberlain in 1964. He has 68 made three-pointers in his last 10 games. That's 6.8 a game. Jeez, my God. It's the most in a 10-game span in his career. It's the second most in a 10-game span all time. James Harden once made 69. Now, Curry can become the 8th player in the last 40 years with 11 straight 30-point games. James Harden, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, Moses Malone, Kevin Durant, Shaq, and Jordan. Most consecutive 30-point games. By the way, James Harden had 32 straight 30-point games, if you remember that, in 18 and 19. That's pretty unbelievable to even think about. Michael Jordan. Curry can join Michael Jordan as the only players to average 30 points a game in a season at 33 or older all time, ever. Jordan was 33 years old, 64 days on the final day of the season when he did it. Curry will be 33 years old in 63 days. So Michael Jordan is the oldest player ever to average 30 points in a season. Curry has 20 career games with 10 made three-point field goals, 15 more than any player in the league. He had 11 the other night, 11 in a game. I mean, think about that. The numbers I just threw at you are eye-popping. Now wait till you hear Embiid's, because these are bananas. This is on another level. Embiid is the first Sixers player with 3 straight 35-point games since Allen Iverson did it in 2006. The last with 4 straight was Iverson in 2005. Remember, Iverson went on that bananas run. You know, I read something about a peanut butter banana Nutella sandwich the other day, and I think banana is like in my subconscious right now. Just throwing that out there. Something on Twitter. Somebody said, you know, it's an underrated sandwich, the banana peanut butter Nutella. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I've ever had that, but boy, does that sound delectable. Embiid is averaging 30 points, 11 rebounds. The last 4 players to do that in a season: Russell Westbrook, Karl Malone, Moses Malone, and Bob McAdoo. Not bad. Embiid leads the NBA in win percentage. You know, the Sixers are winning 79% of the games when Joel Embiid plays. He's averaging 30 points. It's the 3rd highest scoring average in a season by the leader in the win percentage category. And every other player on the list, as we said earlier, won the MVP. Those players include Jordan, Wilt, LeBron, Giannis, and Larry Bird. Now, Embiid is also making 10 free throws per game. Only 6 other players in NBA history have ever made 10 3-points in free throws in a game. Wilt, Oscar, Jerry West, Adrian Dantley, Michael Jordan, James Harden. And Wilt's the only other center that ever did it. It shows you the dominance right now of Embiid scoring 30, grabbing 11, and getting 10 of those 30 from the free throw line. Pretty crazy, the numbers that these two teams are putting up. These two players are putting up. Now, the Sixers are 39-17 with a win. It would be the fastest the Sixers have won 40 games since the 2000-2001 season. They went 40-14 that year en route to the NBA Finals. They would lose to the Lakers. I think many of you remember that. I don't know that I needed to remind you, but I just did. I'm sorry. The Sixers have a 20-4 record when Ben Simmons, who, by the way, is questionable tonight with an illness, Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. It is the best among any starting lineup in the NBA. Now, they are 30-8 with Joel Embiid. They are 9-9 when he does not play. There's another stat for you for why Joel Embiid would be the MVP. With them, they have the best winning percentage in the league. Without them, they're 500. Now, this will be the 14th time, by the way, the Curry brothers will face off against each other if they both play. They are both listed as questionable for the game tonight. So that is just a little look inside at this game, and you can hear it tonight on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage starts at 7 o'clock. It's an interesting game for the Sixers because if you were watching over the weekend here, my friends, the Sixers got a win on Saturday night by beating the Clippers, and Brooklyn took another loss. So the Sixers are now a game and a half up on Brooklyn, but they are now 4 games up on Milwaukee. That is important. Milwaukee lost their last game. Brooklyn lost their last game. Philadelphia just keeps cranking them out. Cranky, man. They've won 4 in a row, 7 out of 10. And I feel like people just keep waiting for that pack to come back. And the Sixers are pulling away from it. And it's funny because 2 teams in the East, 3 teams in the East, really. Boston has won 6 in a row. They can't gain any ground. New York has won 6 in a row. They can't gain any ground. And Atlanta's won 8 out of 10, and they can't gain any ground. You win 6 in a row, and you're still 8.5 games back out. The Knicks have won 7 out of 10, 6 in a row, and they're still 9 games back. That is how dominant of a season that the 76ers are having. I don't think we are all that aware of how good the Sixers have actually been. You know, I was having a conversation with my friend about this the other day, and I said, do you realize they have been extremely dominant this year? But do Sixer fans feel that? Do you feel how dominant the Sixers have been right now? And I guess the bigger question is, do you believe in it? That's the bigger question. Because the numbers I just threw at you are staggering. But do you actually feel that they're the most dominant team? Do you believe in that? We'll talk to Paul Hudrick coming up at 3:20 today. Hey, I have a Sports Bash Cash code word for you. It's coming up in 10 seconds, and it's worth $1,000. So stick around. Here comes the Sports Bash Cash code word.
It's your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Corn. C-O-R-N. Corn. Enter it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word at 3:55.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day. Every weekday at 55 after each hour from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000.
Progressive Motorcycle presents Road Wisdom from the Motor.
Half man, half motorcycle.
Ride confidently in the direction of your dreams. Unless it's a bad dream, then turn around.
Go the other way.
Progressive Motorcycle also presents basic policy starting at $79 a year. Progressive Motorcycle, for those who were born to ride. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Annual premium for basic liability policy is not available in all states.
Today's pros need today's tools, and nobody understands that better than the Home Depot. Our app makes it simpler to get supplies ordered and delivered. Our online project calculators cut guesswork and last-second supply runs. Job site delivery puts what you need where and when you need it. And rental puts the right equipment in your hands, but not your overhead. That's how today's pros get more done. New tech, new tools, old-fashioned hard work. The Home Depot, how doers get more done.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Here we go. Sports Bash Live, Hour 2. I'm Mike Gill. It's a Monday. Is it Friday yet? I just want the draft to kind of get here. Maybe. I don't know. I love talking about the draft, but I want to know what's next. By the way, if you were listening on Sunday's edition of The Locker Room with Billy Schweim, you heard Ron Jaworski say something that I've been saying a lot. I'll play that audio for you here in just a second. Sixers and the Warriors tonight here on 97.3 ESPN, and hopefully we'll have Paul Hudrick talk some more Sixers with us in about 20 minutes here. But draft, want to get into that. We know the Eagles, can go in a variety of ways. They can go corner. They can go wide out. They can go, holy moly, they can go linebacker. That's probably not going to happen. They need a safety. That's not going to happen. They could go edge rusher. They could also go offensive line. We had people texting in on Friday and Thursday of last week saying they need Penei Sewell. They need to get an offensive lineman. Ron Jaworski, what say you?
I don't think left tackle is a bigger problem than most people do. I look at the tape and I thought, the guys played well at the left tackle position.
Yeah, I agree with him. 9 games for Jordan Mailata at left tackle. I did a little extra digging on Jordan Mailata over the weekend. I'm writing a story for 973ESPN.com. And Jordan Mailata, this is pretty amazing when you think about this. All right, he played 9 games at left tackle. He played 1 game at right tackle. He played 9 games at left tackle. Did you know that Mailata finished as Pro Football Focus's top 15 graded offensive tackle in the league from week 11 to the end of the year? In other words, he started, got his feet underneath of him, and once he got his feet underneath of him, he was one of the top 15 left tackles in football. It's not bad when you consider the man has never played football before in his life. Jordan Mailata, to me, is Joel Embiid. You might say, huh? What? What are you talking about? This is a guy that is 6'9" and 400 pounds when he got into the league, Mailata. He played rugby. He didn't play football. Joel Embiid played soccer. He didn't play basketball. Joel Embiid has very little very little basketball background. Very little. He essentially played a handful of high school seasons, played 1 season at Kansas, and then keep in mind, he missed 2 full years. Joel Embiid has about 10 years of basketball experience, period, and he could potentially be the best player in the league. I feel Jordan Mailata is that. Well, what do you mean? There are guys who are just better than everybody. Mailata is that guy. Think about this number. Jordan Mailata surrendered 32 pressures on 502 pass blocking attempts. And a majority of those 32 pressures came in the first 5 games that he played. After that, keep in mind, he's 6'9", 400 pounds. Now, I don't think he weighs 400 pounds anymore. That's what he was when they drafted him. This is a kid, unlike Joel Embiid. Well, I shouldn't say unlike Joel Embiid. Embiid didn't play for 2 seasons. Mailata didn't step on a field for 3 years. He essentially just practiced. And they said, get on out there and play. If you remember, the first game Jordan Mailata played was he started at San Francisco on Sunday Night Football. And, oh, by the way, it was a game the Eagles won. He made his first career start, his first time he had ever played in an actual live football game was this year. So what Jaworski says,
I don't think left tackle is a bigger problem than most people do. I look at the tape and I thought, the guys played well at the left tackle position.
Yeah, you know why? Because he watched Jordan Mailata and saw the same thing I did. Pretty crazy. I think the Eagles with Jordan Mailata really lucked out. Somebody drafted him. I can't think of his name. I do want to – this was something else that Jaws said on Sunday in the locker room with Billy Schweim.
He knows where games, for the most part, are won or lost, and that's in the trenches. He's always been very, very respectful of those guys on the offensive line and defensive line, and he looks to them first. And his defensive line is still one of the best in the NFL. The offensive line, when healthy, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks come back, one of the best in the NFL.
A lot of that I've been saying here. They have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And he was asked about what direction they could go on draft day, and it was one area that you have to give Howie Roseman credit for is, and many people believe, the way you win a Super Bowl, the way you win a championship, the way you build a team is in the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line, and that is an area that this team has excelled in finding talent. So, yeah, they may have missed at wide receiver. They may have missed at corner, but the most important position on the field, they hit on. If there's one lesson from the 2020 season and this year's Super Bowl in today's NFL, more than ever, Sal Paolantonio was on Friday's show, and he said it, you must protect the quarterback. In 2020, blitzing the quarterback was a 5-year high. 28% of the time, most of the time last year, it was over 33%. That team just sent the house, except for the Eagles. Blitzing is more prevalent. They're doing it in more exotic ways, and it's much more difficult to find, decipher, and stop. The Super Bowl came down to Tampa Bay blocked for Tom Brady, and Kansas City did not. Kansas City was better all year long. They lost their tackles and lost the most important game of the year. On the flip side of things, the Eagles gave up 65 sacks. It's the most in the NFL, period. And I think it's apparent that they have to figure out who's going to play left tackle, but I think he's on the roster. And so does Ron Jaworski, who said it here on Sunday.
I don't think left tackle is a bigger problem than most people do. I look at the tape, and I thought, the guys played well at the left tackle position.
All right, that was Ron Jaworski on Sunday. So I think, and I've kind of said this all the way leading up to the draft, I think you can cross Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater off the list. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't take Rashawn Slater. In fact, somebody threw a scenario at us on Friday's show that I still think I was talking about this weekend. Whoever that guy was, he brought up an excellent point, which was, what if 4 quarterbacks are taken? What if 3 wide receivers are taken? Kyle Pitts, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, and Penei Sewell. What if those 11 guys are off the board? Then what do you do? And some would say that would mean that Howie Roseman could take the guy that he would want to take, because then he could say, well, everybody else was off the board, and I'll take Rashawn Slater. The safe guy, but at the most important position on the field, the offensive line. 609-403-0973. Jared, 31-300. You go by 31-300, 31,300, 31300. I always wonder when people have these random numbers, what is the basis of the numbers? He's watching on YouTube. Mailata was so good last year. The rest of the O-line except Kelsey was garbage. I thought Kelsey was average last year. I thought Jack Driscoll played well when he played. He was hurt too much. I thought Nate Herbig played well early. I thought he struggled late because he was moving from left to right way too much for a rookie. I thought Matt Pryor was hideous. I thought that Sayamala was very good when he played. When he came back from the injury, I thought Sayamala was probably the best that he's ever played. If you just sat and watched Sayamala, you saw one of the better left tackles and left guards in football, I thought, last year. The problem was too many guys moving, too many weeks not playing next to the same guy. I mean, you can't win. Like, ask anybody who's played offensive line in this league. You don't have to have the best guy next to you, but it helps to have the same guy next to you week in and week out. Anthony, yo, Mike, what up? Happy Monday. What I miss watching from work. I can't help you with that. You can watch from you miss watching the show from work? I don't know. Can you not watch right now? You seem to be watching. You just messaged me. Are you watching? I clicked on that one by accident. That was my fault. I want to this is the one I meant to throw up. If Denver takes Parsons and Dallas takes Horn, a disaster. Not a believer in Surtain. Waddle and Smith don't fill needs like Parsons and Horn. Well, I don't agree with that. They need a wide receiver. They need a playmaker. I agree they don't. I would say corner is the biggest need they have. I like Micah Parsons. I have no belief that they would take him. But I don't agree with you. Okay, not a believer in Surtain. I'd like to know why there. I like Patrick Surtain. I like Horn a little bit better, but I don't mind getting either one. Waddle and Smith don't fill the need. I would say they help a lot because I am a believer in Jalen Reagor, and I think that you need to find the guy to complement because I don't think Reagor can be the number one, but I think he can produce like a number one if he's the number two, if that makes any sense. Because if he's the number one, teams will take him out. But if he's not the number one and someone else is, they can't focus on Reagor, and that brings out the best of what Reagor can do. 609-403-0973. Let's get this one up. Waddle could be the best receiver in the draft if he stays healthy. The Eagles don't have a separator, and Waddle is an incredible separator and elite route runner. Yeah, Waddle and the Waddle versus Smith conversation is an interesting one. The two guys that play for the same team. One guy was the Heisman Trophy winner. The other guy, many believe, is the better player, but Smith, to the common fan, they saw him and he won the Heisman. That doesn't mean anything. Winning the Heisman means zippo for pro success. The Alabama coaches would tell you Waddle was the better player. The numbers would say Smith was the better player. That's a tough one. To me, if I'm evaluating these and I'm the Eagles, what I'm looking for is who complements what I already have better. Now, you would say, no, just get the better guy. Fit is everything. Scheme and fit. And I'm not sitting here telling you which one is the better fit. To me, Waddle, I don't want to say is seemingly similar to Jalen Reagor. I think he's better than Reagor, but do they do something that is similar? You look at those two guys and say, well, those two guys are similar type of wideouts. Devonta Smith, on the other hand, he's a little bigger in terms of height, but man, he's skinny. I look at Devonta Smith and say I would say, what do I project him as? This doesn't mean I'm right. I'm just saying when I watch Devonta Smith, I see a taller version, and this doesn't mean he's bad, of the best of what Deshaun Jackson gave you. When Deshaun Jackson was playing at his best, I see Devonta Smith being that type of player. That's not a number one stud A guy. I always said Deshaun Jackson isn't a number one wideout. He's a number one playmaker. Get him the ball, let him do stuff. He was also a smaller guy. Smith is to me, is like a taller version of Jackson. I don't want to say like a one-trick pony, but that's how I kind of envision him at the next level. So I don't know if having Waddle or Smith is the better option. Which of those two guys do you guys like out there? 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. It is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Inside the Sixers on the way, Embiid and Curry tonight, right here on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, on the text board, Mike, this schedule stretch for the Sixers is crazy. Started it great, but they can find a way to win the next 4 tough games. They'd have the Bucks tiebreaker. 1 seed would be wrapped up in the rest of the guys here and there. Yeah, this schedule, when we saw it, was nuts. We couldn't believe it. But they're getting to the end of it this week. This is the last week of this wacky, wild schedule. We'll look at it. Paul Hudrick, who's in and who's out tonight? Will Ben Simmons play? Will Tobias Harris be back? All that and more. Inside the Sixers is coming up next. Sports Bash brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt is now open on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, mattblattnissan.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. All right, Sports Bash tonight. It's the Sixers and the Warriors. You can only hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Yes, indeed. Tom McGinnis on the call. You can hear the game live at 7 o'clock. And, of course, Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers going to join us here in just a second as we get you ready for what should be a very fun game tonight. I hope Curry plays. The Sixers have kind of caught some breaks over this very difficult schedule where they've had a bunch of teams, that are very good teams that they have not had to face. They didn't have to face Durant. They didn't have to face Harden. They didn't have to face Kawhi on Friday night. They've kind of got through this stretch of games where they have not had to face these teams at full strength. So I think that will enter into people why, this team is not as good. This team isn't, I can't believe in them. Hey, look, they're going to be Jason Blevins, one of our Sixers contributors, who does an excellent job. He kind of writes these, very researched pieces. And he did a piece on 40-20, 40 before 20, winning 40 games before you lose 20 games. And the Sixers right now are on pace for that. They're on pace to win 40 games before they get to 20 losses. So I don't know if that means we can believe in them or not, but let's bring Paul into the conversation. Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers for the Monday edition. And it's a fun game tonight, fun conversation we're having here, Paul, on which of the guys. All right, if I was just to say to you, you could watch this guy play all 82 games. You going Curry, you going Embiid?
That's a really tough one because they're both, especially this year, the way they're both playing kind of at the peak of their powers right now. I mean, that's even scary to say for Steph with the years he's already put together, but he's arguably having one of the best years of his career. I would say Embiid only because we haven't seen it. We haven't seen that full season of Joel Embiid playing a ton of games. We've seen Steph, in certain seasons, Steph play a ton of games, win a couple MVPs. So I guess from the standpoint of that we haven't seen it yet, I'll lean Embiid on that one.
Yeah, to Embiid, this particular year anyway, he's like watching 5 different guys rolled into one on any given night. I mean, I can't even think of a guy comparable to Embiid, like doing what he does in the league currently. Like, I get it. Curry's probably the best at what he does, but there are other guys who are similar. Like I can say, Dame Lillard is very fun to watch, and they're similar type of guys, and there's other guys out there, but nobody else does what Embiid does.
Right now, no. I mean, the closest kind of historical comp would be like Hakeem Olajuwon. And that's saying an awful lot because Hakeem Olajuwon was unbelievable in his prime with the way he could play both, two-way, so much skill. And I'm sure if big men shot the 3 ball in Hakeem's day, I'm sure he would have stepped out there and taken it more. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, Mike, because he referenced after the game, Joel Embiid, that over the summer, he watched a lot of Dirk Nowitzki and how he kind of operated around that nail area, which is kind of like around the top of the key, and how much harder that makes it to double team him. And to me, it struck me because I remember, we heard as early as his Kansas days that Joel Embiid would watch video of Hakeem Olajuwon, then go out there and just mimic his moves. So like the fact that he has that capacity mentally and just the ability to kind of memorize that and enact it. And like now he's doing it with Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, these are some of the greatest players to ever walk the earth. And he is just taking nuggets from all of their games and making it his own. And it's been so fun to watch. It's such a special season. And I really hope the Sixers fans like kind of appreciate how special it is.
Yeah, I mean, take us back to Friday night and what he did in that game. I mean, the game against the Nets, his last 4 games, he's just been bananas. It puts him up at 30 points per game and 11 rebounds. I mean, he's having, to me, the MVP season. I know people saying he's missing 18 games. And I know this is going to be a conversation for these last, month and a half of the season here. But to me, they're the number one team. They have a 79% winning percentage when he's in the lineup. They're 500 without him. To me, the answer seems clear. It almost feels like the year that they gave Brogdon the Rookie of the Year just because he didn't play enough, when it was clear Embiid was the most impactful rookie that season. And to me, he's the most impactful player right now.
It's fair, Mike. I mean, and listen, I don't want to take anything away from Nikola Jokic because he's also had an unbelievable season. He's playing really well. But kind of to your point, I mean, the Sixers are the number one team in the Eastern Conference, and they win almost 90% of their games when he plays. So I think that you can't overlook something like that. That's very significant. The Nuggets right now, I think, are like 5th and 6th, and, no Jamal Murray, so they're probably going to, I don't want to say definitely, but there's a chance they could sink even lower than that. And it is unfair, because especially it was actually Kevin McCormick who brought this up on the Coming In for Landing podcast. He said, is it really fair given this season, given how weird it is, and, the condensed schedule and the weird offseason, and is it really fair to just kind of reward Jokic the MVP simply because he's played more games, because his team didn't have a COVID outbreak, and because he's been 100% healthy? I mean, I get it's like an old school mentality. The best availability is the best ability is availability. But I don't subscribe to that personally. I'm kind of more with you, where Joel Embiid has been the best player in the NBA this year. He's been the most dominant player in the NBA this year. So to me, if I had a vote, which I do not, he would be the MVP thus far.
Yeah, I would agree with that. For me, tonight they're playing Golden State. Curry might not play. Oubre might not play. Seth Curry might not play. Harris might not play. Simmons might not play. But one guy who might play, let's talk about that, could be George Hill. What do we know there?
Yeah, not much. I mean, it seems like to me at this point, the thumb is not an issue anymore. It's just a matter of him having his legs underneath him. And when you're 34 years old and you haven't played in since January, that's no small thing. I mean, they need to make sure that he can handle, whatever minutes it is. I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be much, but they got to make sure he can handle whatever 15, 20 minutes, because you don't want him going back out there and then having a soft tissue injury and then being stuck on the sidelines even longer. So it's better to make sure he is right. And what I imagine Mike will be, he'll warm up, he'll see where he is, and he'll probably let the team know, yeah, I should, I can't go tonight, or he can't. So to me, I think he is healthy. I don't think the thumb is an issue. I don't think anything else is lingering. I think it's just a matter of, is he physically fit enough that they feel comfortable putting him in an NBA game and letting him play rigorous minutes. So I think that's all it comes down to. Of course, I'm with every Sixers fan. I would love to see him play, but I think they're going to be cautious, and I think it's the right move considering everything.
Well, early when they first got him, what did Doc say? We want to see about 10 games. If he plays tonight, that means 11. They got 10 after, or they got 11 after this. So if he plays tonight, that would give him 12. So you would imagine he makes his debut this week.
I would think so. If he's questionable at this point, to me, I always like questionable is like 50-50, I guess. So if there's a 50-50 chance he's going to play tonight, they have 3 more games this week, Phoenix and the 2 Milwaukee games. I imagine he has to get in on the action at some point in those 3 games. So if it's not tonight, I would be very surprised if he doesn't play any games the rest of this week. I think you'll see George Hill this week.
Yeah, he has not played in a game since January the 24th was the last time that he actually appeared in an NBA game. So he's got to have to get something going to get the legs under him, get his, cardio built up. So this week would give him, about 10 games to get in if he could end up going here. Do you think over the last 10 games of the season here, we might see anything different from Doc with the rotations, start to get into playoff mode, or do you kind of keep, what you have and then enter the playoffs and shorten those things up?
It's a good question. I have a feeling he told us before that he had an idea of what his playoff rotation will look like right now. But at the same time, you got a guy like Korkmaz who's really coming on and really playing good basketball. Shake Milton's kind of been up and down. And then you have Matisse, who is obviously elite defensively, but isn't giving you much offensively. So you kind of have to balance all that. And I think there is still like a little bit of a competition between those guys. And then I don't want to forget Anthony Tolliver. He was pretty solid in his debut. Listen, he missed a couple shots. I think the first one was he didn't have his legs underneath him after making a really nice defensive play. Second one, he overcompensated for the short one and bricked it long. So I think the shot's going to come because that's always been there with him. But what I was impressed by, he looks good. He looks fresh. He moved his feet really well defensively, made a couple smart veteran-type plays that maybe, with all due respect to Mike Scott, maybe Mike Scott doesn't make them. He kind of could be a little over-aggressive sometimes. That one block that Tolliver had on Paul George. That's an outstanding defensive play. So I think he could still be a factor in this one way or another. So I do think there are some things that Doc Rivers still has to figure out. So I imagine his rotation is still probably going to go at least 10 deep for the next couple of weeks. To your point, maybe, the final week, maybe they figure some things out. But at the same time, the schedule softens up. So you might look to get some guys some breaks too. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation. But I think, with the Sixers, because they are pretty deep right now, because they're so talented, they should have no trouble with a first-round opponent. So you do have time to kind of figure that stuff out in the first round.
Well, two things on that. The first-round opponent would be interesting. Now, you got this wonky play-in thing, so you really can't see the standings yet. But Atlanta's won 8 of 10. Boston's won 6 straight, 8 of 10. New York has won 6 straight, 7 of 10. You got those teams in the middle starting to gain some confidence here.
Yeah, for sure. But it's funny because I really thought the Heat would turn it up, and they really have not. They beat Brooklyn yesterday, but Brooklyn pretty shorthanded. So that I don't know how much you can really glean from that game. But yeah, I mean the Heat really haven't turned it up. To your point, the Celtics have, the Hawks have, the Knicks have. They're all playing really good basketball. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of who sneaks in. The Hornets are very banged up now, But here's the thing: I would say, Mike, the Sixers, the way they played this year. Those 3 teams you named, the Knicks, the Celtics, the Hawks, we haven't really seen them play much against them. We get 2 of those coming up. But they've taken care of business against the Celtics, and they've taken care of business against the Knicks. So, yes, it's not ideal, I guess. You don't want to necessarily play those 2 teams, especially if they are rolling going in. But at the same time, there's no reason the Sixers can't beat any of those teams, or should be. I mean, really, they should be able to handle any of those teams in a 7-game series. We've seen what Joel Embiid has done against those teams. So full strength in playoff mode, I can't imagine any of those teams really giving the Sixers much problems.
Give me your thoughts on how they will use Korkmaz come playoff time, because without Tobias the other night, he closed the game out.
Right. I think it's still up in the air because Doc kind of has an interesting, like those 3 guys, the trio of Korkmaz, Shake Milton, and Matisse Thybulle are an interesting trio because they kind of all bring 3 very different things, right? Korkmaz just shoots the heck out of the ball, and he's got ultra confidence and lets it rip, which this team needs. They need a guy who just will fire it. On top of people to make them, they need someone who just will aggressively fire, and Korkmaz does that better than anyone on this team. With Shake, it's another ball handler, it's another creator. And defensively, he is better than Korkmaz, I would say. It's 6'6", a little stronger this year, so he's been better on that end. And you got Matisse Thybulle, who is this elite defensive disruptive player. So I'm very curious to kind of see what will Doc do. I mean, is it going to be a situation where those guys are going to play based on need, based on matchup, or is he going to roll 2 of those guys and another guy's going to be waiting in the wings? Like I think with the way Korkmaz has played recently, he has to be considered a candidate for a rotational spot. I'm not saying that he should get it or that he definitely will get it, but I think given the way he's played, he has to be under consideration.
Yeah, and then I guess another guy who's been getting a lot of minutes, I'm imagining that's more out of necessity right now, but does Mike Scott see playoff minutes?
I would say no at the moment, especially again we don't really know what Anthony Tolliver, what he's still got his 10-day, he's still got a few more days on that. I would imagine, I don't know this, I have no inside knowledge of it, but it would surprise me if they didn't sign him to at least another second 10-day to get a deeper look at him. And look, you're kidding yourself if you don't think that that's direct Mike Scott competition, because it is. So I think Tolliver's, like I said earlier, I think he's going to have something to say about all this. And so I would say regardless, I don't think Mike Scott is in the playoff rotation right now because you have way too many guys that are playing better than him and that can bring more to the table. And when you get to the playoffs, you can roll with those lineups where Tobias is kind of at the 4 with a couple bench guys. So you really don't need Mike Scott. So I would say as of now, he's out. And there's still a chance that Tolliver can even move ahead of him on the depth chart.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are starting to say, get Scott out of there. He's playing out of position, number one. I mean, sadly, he's got to play a lot of center minutes there. But I feel like that first year they got him, he had a lot of big shots and had some moments, but he really hasn't been able to regain and find that shot. So I would imagine if Tolliver can come in and give you 8 to 10 minutes and hit a shot here or there, he probably would get the upper hand.
Yeah, and I would say, and I like Mike Scott. I've defended him a bit here in the past, but like the flat out honest take here is that he just hasn't been good. And it's not just the shot. It's I feel like defensively he's had his moments. To your point, when he's playing out of position at the 5, I think he's actually stood up pretty decently. He's held out okay. But I think a guy like Tolliver, he flashed it. I mean, Tolliver doesn't even know everything yet. Like he doesn't even know exactly the defensive scheme or exactly the offensive scheme. He doesn't even know the players he's playing with. And already in that game against the Clippers, he made so many good little like showing on pick and rolls, switching on guards and holding up. Little things like that I don't think Mike Scott necessarily does as well. Mike Scott is more than happy to be physical, and that's important too. I mean, you need guys who are willing to throw their body around, give you a good, hard, clean playoff foul. But I think in the modern NBA, I think could see the argument that Tolliver could be more valuable.
All right. The takeaways from the Sixers' victory over the Clippers. If you missed that from Friday night, they're up right now at 97.3 ESPN. Ben Simmons might be out tonight with an illness. You might get no Tobias. You might get no Seth Curry. You might get no Dwight Howard either. So
easier to say who's available at this point, Mike.
So we'll keep an eye on when Doc speaks, and we'll have that at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Give him a follow for tonight's game, and the Sixers take on the Warriors right here on 97.3 ESPN. And he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk on the hotline. All right, Paul, we'll see you.
Sounds good, Mike. Take care, man.
There he goes, Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider. And, of course, he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And the point that you make about Anthony Tolliver, people might be like, who the hell are you guys even talking about? He's a guy that shoots, playoff experience, is a guy who can knock down some threes, veteran, just gives you that extra veteran guy on the team. But my question about the playoff rotation, not like, are they going to start playing 9 guys or 8 guys here? I'm talking about, are they going to start figuring out, hey, Korkmaz, are you getting these minutes because we're giving you a chance to earn playoff minutes? Korkmaz has played really well. And I would imagine, Korkmaz played 38 minutes the other night against the Clippers. And I would imagine that if Curry can't go tonight again, Korkmaz gets those minutes. Right? If Simmons can't go, it'll be interesting to see. If Simmons can't go tonight, he's got an illness. He's questionable. So we'll keep our eye on Simmons' availability for tonight. But if he can't go tonight and George Hill can, I'm not saying they start George Hill and just throw him right out there. But do they go with Shake Milton in the starting lineup, and that Hill has to actually get, 25 minutes in his first game since January 24th? So it's almost an interesting but dynamic here that if Simmons doesn't play, Hill could be the guy that gets into the lineup, and then they need him right off the bat. So keep an eye on that. Something to think about for tonight's game. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, brought to you by Clark's Moving Storage in South Jersey. For your next local or long-distance move, Clark's Moving and Storage is your first call. They're dependable and always show up online, clarksmoving.net. This is the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Hill. This is 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, download the free mobile app. All right, I see text messages that I haven't got to, so I'm going to clear them out on the other side. If you have a text message, Phillies, Flyers, Eagles, Sixers, send it in now. And also, if you're watching the show live in the chat, we will answer as many of those as we can as well. Coming up, Geoff Mosher, football at 4, Bob Wankel on the Phillies. I want to get some Phillies conversation going as well on Aaron Nola and the Phillies this weekend. Back with more Sports Bash. All right, a Monday edition of the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Appreciate everybody watching the show. If you have a question you want to throw into the chat, you can do it now. Kyle Dubray watching on YouTube. Mike, with the Nets being a mess, I think this is the year we do it. 2021 championship. They got a shot. The Nets are a mess, but that doesn't mean that they can't turn this thing around. Look, the Nets are banking on continuity, chemistry be damned out the window. You know, I think when all three guys, I saw this today. I forget where I was reading this, but all three guys, when they play together, they are 5-2. When all three guys play together, they are 5-2. That's it. They've played 7 games. We don't know what to think about that team. I mean, in reality, we simply don't know what to think about that team. I'm not going to count them out. They got 3 Hall of Famers on that team. The rest of the team, not all that impressed with. They lost over the weekend again. But who the heck was playing? Durant got hurt again. So, look, it is one of the big unknowns. This is akin to when the Sixers had Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and that crew. Oh, they've only played, 12 games I think they played together going into that year, into that playoff year. And they ended up winning the first round of the playoffs with ease, and then they went 7 games with the Toronto Raptors before they got knocked out. But they did not have a lot of experience, and that was the big question. Are they going to be able to turn it on? They only played 12 games together. I guess they did or didn't. I don't know. I mean, they got knocked out in the second round, which was disappointing. You can make an argument that if that Sixer team had a little bit more chemistry, the Raptors team had a ton of chemistry. They had basically played the whole season together, save for the fact that Kawhi Leonard missed a lot of games, but the rest of those guys played the whole season together. So I like the Sixers' continuity better than I like Brooklyn playing 7 games, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of this thing. Let's see, what else do we got here? Let's go over the text board. 609-403-0973. Mike, I view Smith as another D-Jack, a deep threat home run hitter, but with his size, I see him health being an issue, exactly like D-Jack. Well, that's what I said. I look at Devonta Smith as a taller version of Deshaun Jackson. Home run hitter, health problems, always going to have leg issues. But the guy's got toothpicks. I feel like he's the guy that's going to have – he's not a 90-catch guy. I think he's a 58-catch guy for, 1,100 yards. And 8 of those happen to be for 50 yards or more. That's kind of how I see Devonta Smith. Smith is a better route runner than Waddle, Jackson, or Reagor ever imagined to be. He's a better fit. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a more polished guy than all of those, than Reagor and Jackson. I can't say that for Waddle. I don't think that's fair because neither one of them have played in the pros. But in the college game, sure, Smith is a better route runner, and I think he's the better fit. But who do the Eagles think is the better fit? I don't know. Does Jalen Reagor, and we never saw it. How did him and Deshaun Jackson, how would those two guys have played together? Mike, it's an indictment on Jalen Reagor if the Eagles draft a wide receiver with the 12th pick. Well, that's not saying anything crazy. Yeah, I don't think it's an indictment. I think everybody would understand it's an indictment of this fact that this team has not drafted wide receivers if they have to draft another wide receiver. And I don't necessarily think it's an indictment on Jalen Reagor, although I don't think what you're saying is off base. I don't think the Eagles know what Jalen Reagor is. How could they? And number 2, the offense is going to be completely different this year. So even if Reagor had a good year last year, he's going to be used differently in this offense than he was in last year's offense. So Yeah, I think to say it's an indictment on him is fair, but it's not a surprise. This team has no idea what they have in him. Nick Sirianni could get his hands on him, and he could be a first-round player. We have no idea. I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and says he's a bust. If Justin Jefferson played for the Jets, I got news for you. Justin Jefferson wouldn't be Justin Jefferson. If Justin Jefferson played for the Eagles last year, I got news for you. He wouldn't be 1,400-yard Justin Jefferson. Fit offense, that all matters. You put Jalen Reagor in Minnesota last year, we might be saying, man, he was the pick after us, and we took Jefferson. Jefferson's probably the better player, but he also went to the better offense. I'm not going to write off Jalen Reagor at all, but to say it's an indictment on him, I think is fair, but it's not some, I think that you were trying for some luscious hot take, and I'm not giving you credit for that. Because it's really not that big of a take. Come on. They drafted a receiver in the second round the year before. They drafted one in the first round last year, and they still need another receiver. So it's just an indictment on everybody. All right, another text. Jalen Waddle reminds me of Henry Ruggs last year. Everyone is falling in love with the speed and intangibles, but if you watch the film in college, there wasn't much. They really weren't that good or productive. If you don't produce in college, it's hard for me to believe you're going to produce in the draft. Well, to say that Waddle didn't produce in college isn't really fair at all. I mean, if you know anything about Jalen Waddle, he got hurt. And if you know anything about what kind of player he was when he played, he was highly productive. The problem was he had the ankle problem, and he had the injury issues in this year, and his freshman year, he had 848 yards and 7 touchdowns playing on a team that had Jerry Jeudy and Ruggs on it. And same for 19. As a sophomore, he was behind Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. 2 guys that were drafted in the first round of the draft. And yet they still found a way to get him on the field. He scored 17 touchdowns in 3 seasons there. Now, last year he got hurt. In 6 games, he had 591 yards. He averaged 21 yards a catch. He's a big play guy, no question about it. But to sit there and say, if you don't produce in college, it's hard to produce in the NFL. There's plenty of examples of where that's wrong. There's a lot of guys. I mean, DK Metcalf did not, quote unquote, produce in college, right? There's a reason why DK Metcalf had a lot of question marks about him. In his not senior, I guess he left as a junior. Metcalf, his best season in college was 39 catches for 646 yards. So, yeah, if you don't produce in college, that doesn't mean you can't produce in the pros. And there's plenty of guys who have produced at record levels in college, and then they come into the NFL and they can't produce. Smith produced at an epic level last year, due in part to Waddle getting hurt. If Waddle doesn't get hurt, Smith is not winning the Heisman. So let's stop saying, well, he won the Heisman because he was the best. He wouldn't have won the Heisman if Waddle was there, because Waddle would be way more involved in the offense. When Waddle went down, what happened? They went to Smith. Over and over and over again, by the way. All right, football at 4 on the other side. We will continue. Now, if you have a football at 4 question for Geoff Mosher, and you want it answered by Geoff during football at 4, if you're on the chat, put it in there now, and we will queue up all your football at 4 questions. And if you're on the text board listening on the radio, 609-403-0950. 0973. Eagles draft questions coming up next. Football at 4. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. So we will answer all of your questions on the other side. Don't go away. Plus, in 10 seconds from now, I have another Sports Bash Cash code word, and it's worth $1,000. And it's coming up right now.
Win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Flag. 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 Enter it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word at 455.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day. Every weekday at 55 after each hour from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000.
Ooh, a fondue set! Ugh, now I need to find a coupon code.
Not anymore, Susan. Capital One Shopping instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout.
Wait, instantly?
It's called shopping smart, not hard. Download Capital One Shopping to your computer for free and let it do the work for you.
Don't mind if I fondue.
Haha, that's kind of cheesy. Capital One Shopping. It's kind of genius. What's in your wallet?
Savings and available coupons vary.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but thought it would be too difficult? Then try Babbel. Babbel starts by teaching you words and phrases that gradually get more complex. Soon, you're practicing short conversations. So in 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking a new language in a few weeks. Babbel is built around real life. It teaches you practical conversations that you will actually use. Babbel, language for life. Celebrating 10 million subscriptions sold. Now try Babbel for free. Just go to Babbel.com today. That's BABBEL.com.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Dropped this morning, 6 a.m. Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan are the hosts. Geoff Mosher's here on a Mosher Monday. And, of course, Inside the Birds brings you Football at 4. This hour is brought to you by Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com. Download the Prop Swap app today. Geoff Mosher is in the house, and we've got a lot to kind of dive into as we are now less than 2 weeks from the NFL draft. Motion, another day. Everybody seems to be just conjuring up things as we get closer to the draft, which we expect. But I got a lot of things that I want to kind of dive into. Plus, we have our listeners and viewers sending questions in for you that we will pop up on the screen and let you answer as well. So how you doing, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to the draft, and obviously I feel like the draft could go in a variety of ways. But as we sit here on this Monday, Moshe, do they pick at 12, or are you starting to feel they're going to find a way to get out of that spot?
I think there's a pretty good chance, Mike, that they'll trade up depending on the opportunity is there to trade up. It all depends on how the draft falls. And you would have to tell me what the Falcons do at 4 and what the Lions do at 7. I feel like that's where the guesswork is. If we assume that 5 and 6 with Cincinnati and Miami is some kind of combo of Pitts and Chase, which means that Atlanta passed on one of them and maybe traded out for a quarterback, then I don't know. If more than 3 quarterbacks go in the top 10, and that pushes the non-quarterback positions down, you get a couple offensive linemen go. I think Detroit becomes a big wild card. Would they take? They need anything. They need offensive linemen. They need a wide receiver. They could take a lot of different positions. So I think that if the Eagles want a cornerback, they're going to watch how this draft unfolds 1 through 5, 6, 7, and then perhaps make a move if they feel like they have to get over Dallas and New York to get the corner that they want.
Yeah, it's funny. We had Sal on Friday's show, and he had kind of said he thinks the Eagles are targeting that 9 spot, the 1 spot ahead, because Patrick Surtain would be the guy. If they really want a corner, if they want the one that they want, that they're going to have to move out of 12 to go get that. Do you agree that if they want a corner and they want the one that they want, they're not going to get that guy at 12?
May even have to be 8, Mike, because Denver is pretty stocked at wide receiver. They've got some good offensive linemen. I don't think that if they're not going to go quarterback there, you can see Denver's 9, if I'm correct, right? And Carolina's 8. Yeah, so I could see the Eagles feeling like they need to leapfrog Denver for a cornerback, thinking that that's an area that the Broncos would look toward. They have a defensive-minded head coach in Vic Fangio. They've got some pretty good pass rushers there with Chubb and Miller. I don't know they're the type of team that's going to take that kind of a linebacker and Micah Parsons there. So I think Denver is a team that would probably be in the market for corner, and you may have to go up ahead of them.
Yeah, and I know if you just stay at 12, there was a scenario that a listener brought up on Friday, and I want to get your take on this. You were on Wednesday's show, so this was after you. The 4 quarterbacks are gone. The
Mhm.
top 3 receivers are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Pitts, Sewell, and Horn and Surtain. There's your 11 guys are off the board. You're at 12. What do you do?
Oh boy, that's a good one. I mean, then I suppose Rashawn Slater is there or Kwity Paye is there. I would probably guess that the Eagles would take Kwity Paye unless they got some tremendous offer from another team to move up. That's where I would guess that they would go. Strongly kind of educated guess.
Now, if that was the case, this is where I could see the people who did not like the trade really coming out and saying they moved down and they ended up with a second, level player.
Okay, then you have to hate the first rounder that you got along with it. I mean, that's if you hate the trade, then you can't be all excited about the potential of 3 first rounders next year, and that's fine if you're not. If you think that those first rounders are not going to be high picks because you think Miami will be good and you think Indianapolis will be good, then you have every right to feel that way. Unfortunately, all we have is opinions right now until the pick is made and then the players perform. But I understand both sides of the argument.
Right. No, and I think a lot of people first off, drafting an offensive lineman is never the most, exciting thing. I personally don't think. And by the way, we had Jaws on Sunday. He was on the Locker Room Sunday. He said this. Take a listen. When it comes to drafting of the offensive line and the defensive line, for that matter.
And this defensive line is still one of the best in the NFL. The offensive line, when healthy, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks come back, one of the best in the NFL. I don't think left tackle is as big a problem most people do. I look at the tape, and I thought, the guys played well at the left tackle position.
So he says, I don't think left tackle is the biggest problem that a lot of people do. I tend to agree with him to some extent. Look, I don't know that it's going to be a plus, but I'm willing to give those 2 guys a shot, more so Mailata than Dillard. But I'd let those 2 guys battle it out. But he kind of subscribes to, if your offensive line's healthy, that's not an area that you really need to target in this particular draft.
No, I disagree. I think your offensive line can be healthy, but no matter what, you can't escape the fact that it's old and it's injury prone. Lane Johnson is not old, but he's getting, I think he is north of 30, or he will be in the season. He's obviously had his injuries. We know about Brandon Brooks being well over 30 and his injuries. We know Jason Kelce is 33 years old, has not been injured lately, but probably is not going to be playing much longer past this year. And so that leaves you with Isaac Seumalo, a good young player at left guard. And then left tackle, you either Jordan Mailata or Andre Dillard. We'll see what happens there. But, I mean, you got 3/5 of your offensive line who's you can't guarantee will be there at the end of the year. And you've already had two seasons of seeing that happen. And I'll go even further and say the thing about Rashawn Slater from Northwestern, Mike, is that at 303 pounds, he's a guy that can play pretty much any position on the offensive line. I've had 2 teams tell me that he could play center in the NFL because he's that athletic and that skilled. And because he's a little bit short-armed, it might be better. It's just that you wouldn't want to draft a guy top 12, right, and then immediately start him at center, but maybe something later in his career. But you could move him to guard or tackle. And so I don't think it's a wasted pick because I personally believe that you're only as good as you are until a guy gets hurt. And that's why best player available to me is the approach. It's like saying, we're great at tight end because we have Dallas Goedert. We can trade Zach Ertz. Well, what happens when Dallas Goedert gets hurt? Now you're down to Jason Kroom or, some of those other guys. So I would take the best player available. And for people who might be upset and I hate when people do this, but I know they will. Kwity Paye is not Brandon Graham. We're talking like how many years later? Over a decade later. Teams really like Kwity Paye. In fact, he could go higher than 12 because teams like him so much. And there's not that many 4-3 type pass rushers that supply versus demand could work out in his favor. So I wouldn't look at the drafting as Kwity Paye as some kind of like a consolation prize after you move down. He's expected to be a very good player.
Yeah, it's just, I think you brought this up, the fact that in most mock drafts, you don't see an edge rusher in the top 10, which is rare.
It is rare. I actually thought I did some research and I thought I was going to have to go back like 300 years for that, but it did happen. I can't remember the draft. I think it was the 2010 draft. I'd have to go back and look, but there were no pass rusher. The highest one went 11th or 12th. So it's not as rare as I thought, but it's still fairly rare.
Going back to 2010, you're talking almost a decade.
Yeah.
Was that in the Brandon Grant? Was Graham 2010?
He was 2000. No, Macklin, I think, was 2010. I think Graham was 2009.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Well, it doesn't happen often when teams and Jaws in this same comment said you have to give, these were his quotes, not mine. You need to give Roseman credit that he has taken the model of building the two lines, and he has done a good job at finding talent on the offensive line and the defensive line. So if you think that he's going to hit on somebody, it would be in those two positions.
You would think so. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. That's one of the things that Adam and I talk about a lot on Inside the Birds. We have our fair share of criticisms, whether it's Doug Peterson, whether it's Howie, whether it's Geoff Lurie, but we have credited Howie and the team identity that was really been in place since Joe Banner and Andy Reid were running things over a decade ago of building from the inside out. I think the Eagles do an excellent job, not only Mike, of doing that with first round picks, right, but also in the later rounds. They do draft offensive and defensive linemen, and that's why you get guys like Josh Sweat, who has been a nice developmental story for them. I think the kid that they picked in the last year, Driscoll, 4th round out of Auburn, is going to wind up being a starter for them. If not by the end of this year, then certainly the start of the next year. He's a kid that Jeff Stoutland took to immediately. Liked, if you remember, he started the season opener at right tackle when Lane Johnson got hurt ahead of Matt Pryor. So they really felt that Driscoll has good potential. Sayamalu has worked out. Big V, 5th round pick. I mean, he got himself a nice contract. So they've always done a pretty good job on the trenches. I always credit them for that.
Yep. Kelsey was a 6th round pick. Mailata is a 7th round pick. So they have found guys late. All right, let's get some of the listener questions. If you have one for Geoff, you can keep texting them in 609-403-0973. And if you're watching the show, we will pop them up. This was from a text from Matt in EHT. He says, Geoff, how do you feel about the news coming out that the Eagles are looking to move back into the top 10? And who's their guy if they do that?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about that. I said I think that there's a good chance that they can do it depending on how the board falls. And I would think that they're trying to get to 8 or 9, probably 8. And if they do that, my sense is it would be for a cornerback. And then you get into the question of, is it J.C. Horn or is it Patrick Surtain? This is just my feeling, not reporting anything officially, but I know how much that the team puts into analytics. And I feel like the analytics edge would go to a guy like J.C. Horn, who's just about as twitched up as you can get. So that's what I would say. That's my kind of early guess on it.
You know, that's an interesting question that you just kind of brought up, which kind of could peel into a whole nother category is, you know, I was talking earlier about which wide receiver, if Smith and Waddle were both there at 12, which one complements better? Do they even care? Which one complements Rieger better?
No, probably not. You just figure it out. I mean, to me, Waddle is a Z receiver, and that's also where Jalen Reagor plays. I guess I'd have to ask a little more on this. Can Devontae Smith play the X? You know, you see a lot of press coverage of the X. Now, the one thing is he's so fast that if you don't get your hands on him, you're dead. The other thing is he's very light, though. If you do get your hands on him, can he recover? So that is the kind of the big question between those two. But I think Waddle is going to go ahead of Devontae Smith just based on, listen, nobody knew Ruggs was going to go ahead of Judy last year, so anything can happen. But the feedback I get is that Waddle is the one that would go higher.
Well, and that's a good point, is to keep in mind, Jefferson was the 5th wideout taken.
Yes.
Higgins was, I think, the 7th wideout taken. Ayuk was in there,
8th.
The 6th guy.
Yeah, because Reagor was, you're right. JJ was the 5th. I think Reagor was the 5th, JJ 6th, Ayuk 7th, and then you're right, T. Higgins there 8th.
Right. So T. Higgins ended up being probably the 2nd most productive wide receiver. Claypool may have been the next guy, and he was also drafted in the 3rd round last year. So just getting the first choice of them doesn't always mean you're getting the best one.
And by the way, really quick on that, just because the most productive receiver isn't always the best receiver either. It's who's on the team that's trailing a lot, who's on the team that's passing a lot, who's on the team that's got the better quarterback. I mean, a lot of stuff goes into that.
Right before you came on, I was saying if Justin Jefferson played for the Jets, I don't think he's 1,400-yard Justin Jefferson.
I don't think so.
Right? And quite frankly, if he played for the Eagles, we're probably saying, man, we passed on that guy Rieger. He had 1,400 yards with the Vikings last year. Not that would have happened.
Or Higgins. They would have said Higgins is the guy they should have taken, right?
Exactly. Michael says, please tell me they won't pass on Waddle or Chase if available at 12.
Well, I'll modify that. I don't think they'll pass. Well, first of all, I don't think Jamar Chase is going to be there at 12. I don't think they would pass on Jamar Chase at 12 because I just simply don't think he's going to be there. Waddle at 12, I don't know if he's going to be there either, but if he is, I think the Eagles would take him only if some of the guys we talk about, Surtain, Horn, Kwity Paye, have already been taken.
Yeah, Waddle and Smith, they're the two that seem like you do kind of see one of them getting. I've seen some going even deeper, like 16, 17, which is amazing to me. And I don't know why that would be for those two, but of the receivers, it seems that those are the two guys. Well, we know Chase isn't getting that far. David, now this is a long question, but he says, screw it, trade back to around 15 or 16 and, just keep adding and get one of those second wide receivers, the Batemans, the Tonys, that kind of guy.
I think you can't rule that out. I think the Eagles are sitting in a prime spot at 12. The only thing is, who's trading up to 12 because they think that whoever is at 13 is going to take a quarterback at 14? I guess the Patriots are at 15, correct?
15 is New England, and there's some talk that the Bears might want to try to move. They're at 20.
I cannot see. I know people know the Bears need a quarterback, but people have to understand, and I've been wrong before, but everybody who's involved with the Bears from a front office and a coaching staff standpoint is on a 1-year deal right now. They have to win. They were lucky to be all retained this past year. They're not going to draft a quarterback that may need time to develop when they're all sitting there on their fire me years. You know what I'm saying? Like, they really need to win now. So I don't think the Bears are going to be anxious to be getting a quarterback like Trey Lance, who might need some development there.
By the way, so a lot of people are sending questions in. I'm trying to put them up on the screen to show you that we see them. They're kind of in reference to what we're talking about. Maka says, we drafted 3 wide receivers last year. Let that class develop. You don't need to take another one.
Well, I mean, most teams have 4 or 5 wide receivers, correct? And so,
what do they think of Hightower and Watkins?
I think they want to give them a chance. But by the same token, I've heard people say this about linebackers. They took 2 last year, so don't take one this year. When you're a 6th-round pick like Sean Bradley or Quez Watkins, you are not guaranteed a spot on the team. I know Watkins had a nice flash play last year against the Cardinals, where he took a screen, and and I know Hightower had some nice separation. He would drop a couple of them after he separated, but you're just not guaranteed to make the team when you're a 5th, 6th, and 7th. You're almost fighting every year until you really prove you're that good. So I never let that interfere with how I'm drafting. I'm just going to take the best players I can, and if they beat out the guys I picked last year, all right, so be it. I still got the best players.
No, this is interesting. Let's get that D tackle. I have seen a little murmurs over the weekend about Barrymore from Alabama, the defensive tackle. I guess he's the one defensive tackle on the board that could go in the first round. They have Fletcher Cox. They've got Hargrave, but that's a position they typically like. Would defensive tackle shock you?
Shock me? No, because it's for all the reasons you just said. Surprise me? Yeah, I mean, I'd be a little surprised. That just to me, that means the draft fell in a really unpredictable way, right? And a lot of the guys we talk about went off the board, and not as many quarterbacks were taken in the top 10 or 11 as you might think. By the way, that thing that said draft the DT Mike, was he talking about you? Are you a defensive tackle?
No,
let's get that DT Mike. I thought that was you.
I think it's let's get that DT, Mike.
Oh, man, I would so much rather it be DT Mike Gill. That would be awesome.
No, I don't think that's the position for me, man.
All right, fair enough.
Frank, if Justin Fields would slide, what chance do you think the Eagles would trade up and get him instead of a corner?
It's a very good question. I think there's a lot of Eagles fans that would like that, and then a lot of Eagles fans who would hate that. That would be a very polarizing decision. By the way, what's up, Frank? It's been a while. I think once the Eagles traded out Mike of 5, I think they recognized they were not in the market for a quarterback in the first round. That's just my personal feeling on it. I think that presents a very interesting situation because maybe they didn't think Fields would be there. But to me, it's like if he's there, then somebody's probably trading up with the Eagles to get him, and the Eagles are moving back instead of taking him there.
Now, this one, now he spelled your name wrong, but he did say Geoff with a J. He's Geoff with a G. But Andrew, for Geoff, if one of the 4 quarterbacks happened to be there at 12, would the Eagles even consider taking them?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the Justin Fields question there. I just believe that when they moved out of 6 there, they were moving out of the quarterback in the first round conversation.
I'm not a big fan of taking the quarterback in the first round this particular year. I mean, you drafted the kid in the second round last year.
Yeah, I gotta ask you about that. You went on vacation. I heard you make a comment about what something like why take a question mark this year when you had a question mark last year? And I guess I didn't understand what you were trying to say, because theoretically, if you took a quarterback in the first round this year, you really believe it's not like the front office thinks, oh, this guy's a question mark, but they would really believe that he was the guy. So, I mean, you would if they took Trevor Lawrence, you wouldn't be upset, right? Let's be honest. If they took Trevor Lawrence, would you be upset?
No.
There you go.
But I don't think that any other player is on that level.
So we're going by the Mike Gill grading system here. There's Trevor Lawrence.
Well, do you think anybody's comparable to Lawrence? Like, do you have somebody that close to him?
I kind of try to leave it to the information. I feel like the information I get on Zach Wilson and Fields and Trey Lance is that these guys all project. Now, we all know that word is amorphous, right? But they all project to be better than what Jalen Hurts projected to be coming out of college. And if I were a GM and I felt that way, my evaluation is any of those guys project better, then I would take them.
Didn't Cosell say on Inside the Draft that he thought Hurts and Fields were comparable?
No, he said one quarterback coach who he spoke to felt that they were comparable. But all Adam, Greg, I'm sure, have also spoke to several people in the league. I know Daniel Jeremiah has been outspoken about it, or other people that they feel like these guys. I'm not going to put Mac Jones in that conversation. Fields, Lance, Wilson, Lawrence, of course, all project to be top of the line QBs more so than they projected Jalen Hurts coming out of college.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Hurts. I personally. And look, I'm not Greg Cosell. I'm not some draft expert. I'm just going off of the guys that I watch, and it's saying to me, Hurts is comparable to these guys. Like, and if I say Fields is better, I said this: if Fields is better, it would be like saying that Russell Wilson's better than Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying they're on that level, but that's how. Like, I don't know, is Wilson better than Watson? Maybe slightly.
I mean, they had similar careers, Justin Fields and Deshaun Watson. It was certainly not out of the realm that he could be that good.
Right, but I'm saying, like, to me, that's where Hurts and Fields are. Like, okay, one's Russell Wilson, the other one's Deshaun Watson.
But why do you think then that that Jalen Hurts was not a top 10 pick then? If you felt like that he had that kind of ability and acumen,
there's a lot of guys that people got. Drew Brees was a second round pick. He turned out to be pretty darn good.
No. I understand the exceptions to the rule. I'm just wondering why you feel that Jalen Hurts is as good as a guy who might go in the top 5 or 10 this year. Like what?
Well, I think a lot of times the quarterbacks get pushed up just because there's such a desire to get one.
Yeah, sure.
So sometimes I feel that they're overdrafted. Like,
yeah, that's fair. But that also probably applies to Jalen Hurts, who was not considered a second rounder. But go ahead. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So, like, if you say that we're going to just rank the guys based on player, not that I need a quarterback in the worst of ways, any of these guys, I don't think, like, I think you would take other players ahead of them. It's just that teams just need these quarterbacks so bad that that's what ends up happening. I like Hurts. I think that Hurts has good arm strength. I was surprised at his completion percentage last year. He did not display accuracy issues when he was in college. I don't know if it has to do with the Eagles' weapons or lack thereof, the simplicity of the offense. That's another thing that we don't have a lot of time, but the Eagles' offense, I feel, had to be simplified because of the problems on the offensive line. Moving guys from left guard to right guard, from right guard to right tackle, so that they had to dumb down the offense so much, because I got Hudrick playing left guard one week, right guard the next week, Pryor playing left guard one week, right tackle the next week. They had to simplify the offense for those guys, not necessarily for the skill players.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I agree, because I feel like they did that up for that, like not as much motion as you thought, not as much pre-snap movement, but so many vertical routes when you could have just had shorter intermediary routes to accommodate for your bad offensive line, and yet not that. So I understand what you're saying. And I also don't look at Jalen Hurts' stats from last year at all to try to rate him. I thought he was impressive. I don't want people to think I'm anti-Jalen Hurts at all. I thought he was very impressive for what he was able to do despite what the stats say. I just, as a pure, like, traditional kind of field scout mentality, if I have a player who grades to be a Pro Bowl quarterback, all pro, whatever, I'm going to take him. And it doesn't matter to me if I drafted a kid in the second round.
Maybe that's what the Eagles thought last year when they drafted him in the second round.
Then they probably should have taken him higher.
All right, that's football at 4 today. That's we got a lot more leading into the draft. Andrew will take more of your draft questions tomorrow. Mosher will be back on Wednesday. Listen to today's. They got into a good running back discussion on Inside the Birds. We will talk a little bit more about that on Wednesday. And, of course, Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is each day at 4 o'clock right here. And Geoff Mosher, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk on the hotline. Mosher, take care, man.
All right, fellas. All right, Mike, have a good one.
Yeah, man. And it's, good discussion. I liked it. Good questions from you guys out there. If we didn't get to your question, there was a lot of questions. We will try to do so all this week, all the way leading up to the draft. We will do live questions on the Football at 4 each day leading into the draft here on the Sports Bash. We'll talk more NFL tonight. Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports will be a regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll talk some football with him. We'll go broad NFL, Eagles and NFL with Jeff at 5:25, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Coming up tomorrow, right here on the Sports Bash, Michael Caskey-Blomain talks Sixers, recapping the Sixers and the Warriors. Plus, Mike Greenberg will talk draft. Greeny joins me at 4:30. So this time tomorrow, Greeny on the Sports Bash. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm Mike Gill. A lot of good comments in for Geoff there. I'm looking over at tonight. We got the Sixers and the Warriors. I'm looking over at tomorrow's schedule. Frank's here to talk some Phillies tomorrow. I didn't get a chance to really get into the Phillies. We're going to do that with Bob Wankel coming up in about 8 minutes from now. But Nola pitched a tremendous game yesterday. And the one thing that stood out to me about the game, okay, baseball's got all sorts of problems. And I'm not going to tell you that I can fix all the problems because they got more problems than I can fix. But this is what I know. The crowd erupted when Nola finished the game. Fans love and appreciate great pitching. You want tickets to games when aces pitch against each other. I went to a game. It was a Sunday night baseball game. Phillies, Cardinals. Hamels was making, he was pitching. This was at the Vet. And I think it was Hamels pitching against, I want to say like Chris Carpenter maybe, or no, it might have been a Met. Who would have been a Met? No, it was Cardinals. I can't really remember. I should remember because I bought tickets specifically because of the pitching matchup. Fans buy tickets. The first question they ask is, who's pitching? Who am I getting to see pitch? But sure, baseball keeps pulling starters at 77 pitches and pushes launch angle and exit velo. Stuff that nobody gives two bleeps about. People talk like they love runs and that offense is exciting. They love great pitching. Push the pitchers. Push them. They're the stars. Hey, you want to go to a game tonight? Who's pitching? That's the first question that gets asked. Anytime you have tickets to a game, hey, I got tickets to a game tonight. You want to go? Who's pitching? It's the first question asked every single time other than where are the seats? Where are the seats? They're great seats. Who's pitching? Not who's hitting second in the lineup, not who's hitting fourth, not who's hitting third, not what's the launch angle, not what's the exit velo. Who's pitching? That's the only question that gets asked. Baseball needs to push the pitchers. They're the stars of your game. Let's stop trying to figure out wonky ways to promote offense. No one's watching for the DH. You know why? The DH stinks. He can't hit. If you can name a DH, you're the only person out there. The DH ain't doing it. Pitching. That's what baseball needs to promote. That crowd went nuts because Nola did something that fans don't ever get to see. A complete game shutout. And it was more exciting than Bryce Harper's second deck home run. They went more bonkers for the complete game shutout than they did the 101 exit velocity of Bryce Harper's home run. You know why? Because nobody knows what that means. Coming up next, we'll talk more about Nola, the Phillies, and Gabe Kapler. Guess who's back? Kapler's back. Yep, Kapler and the Giants, they're in town. We'll talk about it coming up next. We'll get back into the NFL. Geoff Kerr is going to join us from CBS Sports right now. The Phillies, nice weekend. Aaron Nola, we discussed a little earlier. The return of Gabe Kapler. We had a big day out of Bryce Harper. We got a lot of Phils. The weekend review. Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, is back to talk a little Phils. It's opening day for me, too. Look, I got my baseball jacket on, ready to go. I got a game tonight. What's going on, Bob?
Oh, not much. It was a good weekend for the Phillies. It was a tough road trip, obviously, there with the Braves and Mets. So to come back and take 2 out of 3 against a decent Cardinals team, I think it was encouraging. No, Saturday was a little bit ugly, but really a good weekend that was capped by an outstanding performance by Aaron Nola, who's taken quite a great deal of criticism here in recent starts and recent weeks. And, is he an ace or is he not an ace? And yesterday, complete game shutout, 10 strikeouts, just 2 hits allowed. And if he can pitch like that, that's something that Phillies fans should certainly be excited about moving forward.
Yeah, and I don't think Phillies fans don't think he has those in him. It's when he has those in him has been the question. I know, by the way, I was thrilled to see a 9-inning complete game shutout, and I want to get into that in just a bit. But I think Phillies fans didn't question whether he has that in him. It's the fact that, hey, when I need you to have that game, you give it to me in April. I would like it in September as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism. I think if you take a look at his numbers and his splits throughout the course of his career, September has been his weakest month in terms of ERA in both 2019 and 2020 especially. He really struggled down his last handful of starts. And so until he in September can go out and pitch in big games that have a really big impact on playoff implications, I think that there's always going to be some lingering questions. But JT Realmuto, sort of stood up for his pitcher yesterday after the game and said that people that don't believe Aaron Nola is a legitimate ace in this sport simply don't know baseball. And of course, you expect a catcher and a guy like Realmuto to say that about Aaron Nola. But when you look at it, I think that there's something to be said for the Garrett Coles of the world, the Jacob deGroms of the world that can pump 98, 99 miles per hour. And you see Aaron Nola sit there at 92, 93, and he's a little bit more of a finesse pitcher. And so you don't necessarily feel that overwhelming dominance that you do with some of the fireballers around the league. But when he's on, he's as good as anybody.
There's no doubt. ESPN just recently ranked the aces. He was the 5th ranked pitcher in all of baseball. Look, this could be one of those things, Bob, where in the NBA, there's only 3 guys. There's LeBron James, there's Kevin Durant, and I don't even know if there is the 3rd guy. Maybe I'm giving him credit, but like if you're not on that level, well, then you're not good enough. Is it the same with pitching? If you're not the best of the best, well, then you're on that next level of the, in basketball, I guess it's like, James Harden and Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry, that they're not LeBron James. They're on that next level down, and maybe that's where Nola is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm actually surprised to see that ESPN ranked him as the 5th best starting pitcher in baseball. I think that maybe a little bit more of an accurate or fair number would be somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. I think that he's definitely in the top half of starting pitchers in baseball, but I don't know that he's the 5th best. Certainly a guy though that I think has that ceiling, and hopefully for Phillies fans, hopefully for the Phillies and the organization, that if they have high stakes games coming down the stretch, he pitches like he did yesterday against St. Louis, and it'll certainly change the story around him.
Yeah, it was DeGrom 1, Garrett Cole 2, Shane Bieber 3, Walker Buehler 4, Aaron Nola 5, Trevor Bauer 6, Yu Darvish 7, Strasburg 8, Scherzer 9, and Lucas Giolito 10. They were the 10 aces that they ranked, and they had Nola number 5. So, I mean, look, obviously it's a sport that doesn't have a lot of like top level aces. They're few and far between too. Very impressive. I love the fact that, and I tweeted this out, is the fans roar. They went nuts for this complete game shutout. And it's like, when you go to a game, like I remember a night at Veterans Stadium, I bought tickets for a game. It was Sunday Night Baseball. Man, it had to be, when was the vet around? So this is before 2004. And it was Cole Hamels pitching against, I can't even remember who he was facing in that game, but I bought tickets because of the pitching matchup. And it's like, I feel like the fans and that aspect of it sometimes gets discounted because all of the offense that gets thrown in our face. But having that ace pitcher and that ace pitching matchup, I feel like baseball doesn't promote that enough.
the game's changed, right? You could have a good matchup on paper, but you know that you might only see these guys for 5-6 innings at a time or in a start. We've kind of worked our way into baseball now being, if you can give a team 6 innings of 1 or 2 runs, that's an outstanding start. And if you go back 15, 20 years ago, if you weren't pitching into the 7th, 8th inning, there were guys that would consider that to be a down start. So the game has certainly changed, and I think it's a little bit harder to build these marquee pitching matchups the way that you might have, a generation ago. But yesterday, a rare opportunity. I think it's been well noted at this point that Aaron Nola had never thrown a pitch in the 9th inning of a Major League Baseball game. And, after the 8th inning, he's mowing them down, and he wanted to stay in that game. And Joe Girardi, to his credit, gave him an opportunity to go back out there, started the inning over 100 pitches. He went out, got the job done, and I felt a lot more confident in what Aaron Nola was going to give you in that 9th inning, the way that he was still locating late in the game, than a guy like Hector Neris, or what Hector Neris may have given you in that spot there. And that's not a knock on Hector Neris, but just if you know a guy's rolling, just let him go out there and put the exclamation point on the effort.
That, no doubt about it. And I think, this whole notion, and it will lead us into our next conversation of, hey, just 5 innings. It's almost like the owners don't want to pay these guys the amount of money. So they're saying, we don't want you to pitch any more than 4 or 5 innings, 6 innings, because we don't want you to have that much of importance, because we don't want to have to pay you. And that is analytical guys like Gabe Kapler, who will be here today. I know that you were on the call with him, and boy, what an interesting guy this guy was in the 2 years he was here. He was like on the Howie Roseman level of hate, I feel like.
He really was. And I know that you're not the number one Gabe Kapler fan. I sort of found myself in this weird position of observing him for 2 years and saying, I don't agree with this, this decision. I don't agree with some of the in-game strategy, some of the lineups that he would piece together. But ultimately, I always kind of found myself defending Gabe Kapler only because I think that he just took the brunt of the criticism for a team that was just so deeply flawed, in a front office that was just unable to put together a deep enough roster to be a true competitor. And so I looked at it and I said, I'm not totally sure if Gabe Kapler is a good manager or not, because I just don't think that he ever really had a roster that was deep enough to be a legitimate contender. And there were all of these expectations, in 2018, certainly in 2019, when they go out and get Realmuto and Harper, that they were going to take this step forward. But they were so top heavy. Those rosters were so top heavy. He didn't have the bullpen pieces. He didn't have the lineup depth that was needed to really be a competitor in the NL East. And Joe Girardi found that out last year. You switch over to a guy like Joe Girardi, and it's like, oh, he's more old school, even though he's still a numbers guy. He has the street cred. He has the cachet. But Joe Girardi ran into the exact same problems in 2020 that Gabe Kapler ran into in 2018, 2019. And so I don't know if Gabe Kapler is a good manager. I don't think he was right for this city. I think the Phillies were right to move on. But at the end of the day, I don't really think the guy had a fair shake when you're working for Matt Klentak in the front office to put together those teams. It weren't good enough.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you. I'm not a huge Kapler hater. I'm not a huge analytics guy. I feel it has a place and use it. But I agree with you. I said Girardi doesn't get nearly the heat that Kapler got. People thought Kapler was the worst of the worst, and here they had a team that basically putt it down the stretch. Same thing. You got no bullpen, hard to win games. I thought Gabe Kapler lost some games because of his decisions. But I don't think he was this albatross of a manager that people made him out to be. It's because they don't like analytics. I don't love analytics, but I don't think that is what made him this guy that was hated so much. I think it was the fact that he relied on it so much, and he was kind of like this, not to mention, he's a good-looking guy. People don't like that. It's that's like rubs people the wrong way almost. So I thought he was such a weird fit here, and the whole analytics thing, like the way he came in and really like that was the message, but it didn't really go all that well. It would seem like it was nothing different than what we have now, a team that's going kind of in this middle ground. So I don't think he was horrible. I think people thought he was the worst of the worst. You got a team coming in now that's not very good, and they're not bad right now. They don't have a lot of talent, San Francisco.
Yeah, they really don't, especially offensively. But you got to keep in mind the Giants were right there at the end of the 2020 season with the Phillies, right? And the Giants were supposed to be the worst teams in the National League a year ago. So you can make an argument that Gabe Kapler got the most out of that team. And I do think that, you talk about analytics and some of the things from a baseball standpoint that Gabe Kapler represented, but I do believe that a lot of the dislike and for, I think, some fans, the disdain towards Gabe Kapler was more about the muscles and some of the photos that were out there, the shirtless bodybuilder photos and, the coconut oil and the spitting up ice cream into a bowl because you didn't want to, take on the added calories and, the aviator sunglasses and all of that other stuff, I think was what really at the end of the day kind of worked against him not being a true Philly guy. And so I think it was a lot less about baseball and about the personality for many people, which is kind of ironic because I think that if you talk to most people in the Phillies organization, certainly my interactions with him on a one-on-one basis, really nice guy, and a likable guy at that. But I just don't think long-term he was the correct fit here. So I do think the Phillies, they were probably a year too late removing Matt Klentak and all that. I think he probably should have gone out with Gabe Kapler, but I think the Phillies did the right thing in letting him kind of get another, a fresh start somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like it wasn't the right fit here. But I also don't feel like the team was no better last year than the two teams that he had. They had the same problems. That being said, this team now, I don't know, after 14 games or 15 games here, if we have a good enough feel, but do they feel like a team that has fixed a lot of the problems? Or you look at center field, do they have other issues? Like, have you learned anything over the 2 weeks that we've seen that this is different than I thought when I saw it? Things evolve as always, but does this team feel like it's heading towards kind of middle groundness?
This is a team that has certainly shown some flaws here in the early going. I think that this is a thin team. I think that there are huge problems in center field. I think that that's not a problem that's going away anytime soon. You're talking about a combination of center fielders that are in the midst of an 0 for 33 run right now at the plate. You see the issues that you have at the number 4 spot in your rotation with Matt Moore. He's been a disaster through 3 starts. He's really struggled. Chase Anderson's been only slightly better. We'll see him tonight. He's at least kept the Phillies in games here. He's only pitched 9 total innings, though, over 2 starts. So there are some question marks for sure, and I think that there are some glaring weaknesses on this roster. But again, it's very similar to what we've seen the last couple of years with this team. When the best players are going well, they have the ability to carry this squad. You see Bryce Harper, when he's at his best, he can win games for you. JT Realmuto can win games for you. Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, and I think Zach Eflin to a slightly lesser extent, have the ability to win games for this team, but they're going to need to fill in those gaps and fill in those secondary and third tier holes if they're going to truly make a run at the postseason going down the stretch.
Yeah. What is your take or timeline for what to do in center field? I mean, do you give Moniak an extended look here? Do you just hit him every day? Are you platooning him? Do you see a Kingery Moniak platoon? Do they just bypass that and go to the next option, which I guess maybe could be Herrera? How do you see this?
I don't believe it was really fair to bring up Mickey Moniak this past weekend. I think you say 3 weeks ago that we don't feel that he's ready yet. We like what he's done. Well, obviously, circumstances have changed. The situation dictates a necessity to bring him up, but I don't think it changes the reality for Mickey Moniak that he's probably not ready yet to step in and contribute at a high level or at the level this team needs him to contribute at. And I think you run the risk now of putting a lot of pressure on this kid. I think that things can snowball for him very quickly. 0 for 8 this weekend with 6 strikeouts. I know he walked twice, but he looked a little bit overmatched. And you're talking about a player that's trying to rehabilitate his confidence. And I think he's in a situation where he's kind of in a delicate situation where things can kind of unravel on him pretty quickly. So, but now that he's up here, I don't think that you can kind of jerk him around and send him back down and say, hey, sorry, this isn't working out. We're going to go to, plan C. So I think you have to give him at least 35, 40 at-bats to prove that he can't do it on a consistent basis. And even then, I think that that's a little bit of a short leash. And I don't know. I mean, I think if internally the Phillies are being honest with themselves, if they're okay with bringing up Odubel Herrera at the ownership level, if they're willing to deal with the PR situation, I don't know how that's not where you go next. You have a guy in your organization who 4 years ago produced 60 extra base hits at the major league level. I don't know how you don't take a look at that solution before you go outside the organization to make a move. But then again, if they just simply don't want to deal with all of the pushback, then I understand that, and that's a decision that they're going to have to make.
All right, Phillies and the Giants. Bob Wankel crossing broad. Phillies with a win over the Cardinals this weekend, series win, I should say, 2-1. So they win that series. They've been playing well at home, not so well on the road. We'll take a look more on that on Friday when we look at the weekend for the Phils. And you mentioned Chase Anderson gets the ball tonight. See if he can do better than Matt Moore, who has not been good, as you chronicled as well. So that's what we got for the Phils. Bob Wankel, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. All right, Bob, we'll see how this week goes. Gabe Kapler's back. I would imagine the 11,000 there will give him a nice greeting.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be very friendly. I'll talk to you soon, Mike.
All right, man. Bob Wankel, everybody, Crossing Broad, our look at the Phillies weekend. And, of course, he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. We got plenty more. Geoff Kerr tonight at 5:25. Talks a little NFL. Stick around.
Today's pros need today's tools, and nobody understands that better than the Home Depot. Our app makes it simpler to get supplies ordered and delivered. Our online project calculators cut guesswork and last-second supply runs. Job site delivery puts what you need where and when you need it. And rental puts the right equipment in your hands, but not your overhead. That's how today's pros get more done. New tech, new tools, old-fashioned hard work. The Home Depot, how doers get more done.
As a dentist, I know what my patients are saying.
Mm-hmm.
She says her gums are irritated.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you can do? You can try new Crest Advanced Gum Restore. It detoxifies below the gum line to restore your gums back to health in just 7 days.
All right, final hour of the show, the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Been a very busy and spirited show. We've had a lot of fun, a lot of good questions from our viewers today, and our text board has been lighting up from our listeners on the radio as well. A little NFL coming up in about 25 minutes. Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports, will join me, but right now, let's get into a little NBA, a little action here. Former Sports Bash co-host Todd Rank is set to join me right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, you can see us battle as we were battling in a text message argument on Saturday night. And I've been asking my listeners today, Todd Rank, who is more fun to watch? Is it Joel Embiid or is it Curry, who, by the way, doesn't look like he's going to play tonight?
I told you that in a text earlier today. He finished the game out on Saturday, but that ankle, man, it was not good. And again, you're talking about a guy size, the frame. He's had some ankle issues in the past. But yeah, we had a good talk on Saturday. And you know, again, I'm going to assume that the majority of your fan base, considering they're Sixers fans, might lean your way a little bit, just slightly. But
well, I say this, like Curry to me is an amazing shooter, and when he is hot, like he was the other night, and he's on this run right now of 10 games, when he's like that, he's unbelievable. But there are other guys who do stuff similar. He's the best at what he does, but other guys do what he does. Nobody else does what Joel Embiid does. There's not another player in the league that's similar that can do what he does.
Well, I think we've seen, again, he's an MVP candidate. I'm not going to denounce that, right? I mean, you've got.
He should win the MVP.
Well, again, and really the only reason he won't is because of the lack of games, right? That's really going to be the only answer.
He missed 18 games, but some of those, this is interesting. A lot of the games that he's missed are due to COVID protocols, not due to injury.
It's been a different year, right? It's a different year.
Do you hold that against him?
Right.
That he couldn't play because of contact tracing. That forced him to miss a handful of games. But he's clearly been the best player.
Well, I don't want to – I mean, I wouldn't hold it against him if he got injured, right? I mean, if you get injured, you get injured. It happens. The reality is if you're telling me that Jokic is going to win it and by the numbers and by some of the things that I've been hearing, it's like it almost sounds like a runaway for Jokic, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But again, is there anything that Embiid can do the rest of the way to kind of sway some of those voters? And, you know, again, to go back.
I'll tell you this, Todd, this number that I think is pretty amazing. Joel, they're 30-8 when he plays this year. They're 9-9 when he does not. And they're.
Do you know the record of Denver? Because I don't have that stat.
What their record played in every game, so whatever their record is, that's what they are.
And they're not in the top 4 in the West, are they?
They're the 4. They're the 4.
They are 4. They've moved up to 4. Okay,
yeah, I mean, they're good. I think I'll get their record here in a second. But here's the number for Embiid that I think is really crazy. And that let me find that number. We brought it up a little earlier. Oh, Embiid has the highest winning percentage of any player in the league. They win 79% of the games when he plays, and he's the only player that has done that. This is pretty crazy. And won at so he leads the NBA in winning percentage, 789. They are 30-8 when he plays, while averaging 30 points per game. He is the third highest scoring average in a season by the person who also has the most winning percentage, and every other player who has done that has been the MVP, And those guys are Chamberlain, Jordan, LeBron, Antetokounmpo, and Larry Bird.
I mean, look, the numbers don't lie. I mean, it's an unbelievable, impressive year for him. This is the best year. This is his, in a sense, it's his coming out party. I think, you and me go back and forth. I think Doc has allowed him to have this coming out party. So I think that in tandem, I think that's a good combination for the two of them. But, again, he's done everything he's supposed to do. To go back to our argument, though, my answer would be this. If you were to tell, like, for example, you just told me Steph may not play tonight. I'm a fan of NBA, but I'm not a Sixers fan. You tell me that. Am I going to look and glance at the game tonight? Of course. But I'm not locked into the game now because Steph's not playing. It doesn't mean that Embiid's not having the better year with the better team. But when I look at the last 10 games of what Steph Curry's done, and I can go a bigger resume than that, but the point is, this is one of the best 10-game stretches ever in the NBA. Yeah. And they brought up a stat the other day, Mike. First off, we know he's changed the game. Before Steph Curry, you didn't defend 35, 40 feet outside, right? I mean, these guys are having to be defended as they cross the half-court line. He has had 20 games in his career of 10 threes made or more.
Yeah.
Second place, Klay Thompson, his buddy, with 5. And some argue that they think Klay Thompson's the better shooter. The point is, and he's not just a three-point shooter, Mike. His handle is sick. His finish at the rim is sick. The way he plays the game is so kind of like a flow. It's a dance. It's like you're not sure what he's going to do next. When I look at Embiid, he's playing unbelievable. But he's a big man. He gets the ball. He might do a fadeaway.
It's harder for the big man. That's the point. Is Curry is doing it in the game, and that's the way the game is played. Embiid is doing it almost in a game that's not created for him. So he has now had to do something that nobody else is doing. That's what makes it, to me, is more impressive, is that Embiid has such an impact on a game that people say is no longer built for the big man.
No, and I'll give you a point that it's not built for the big man. So, again, he is a big man, but in today's game, he'll step out. He'll shoot the three, right? That's all part of the game. It has to be. But what you're saying is Steph plays the game as it is today, but he created the game as it is today, and I just gave you the number. He doesn't play it like everybody else. They can't compete with what he does. They might make 5 threes. This guy is dropping dimes, Mike, at a level we've never seen. And He makes moves to get open. Everybody knows he's the only one on this team this year taking the shot, and he still gets the shot off.
Oh, believe me, he is amazing. I say he's the best. He's the best shooter and
I've ever seen.
I have no problem even saying that he's the best shooter. He's shooting 42% from 3. On this run that he's on, he's 57%.
I mean, Mike, who in the history is even close to that? He's making more than 2-1 on his threes. That doesn't make any sense. That's insanity. Damon Lillard, I love Lillard. He wouldn't be who he is today without Steph making those threes initially from 35, 40 feet. Now Lillard is saying, I'll make it from half court too. And he's a fun player to watch. There's a mystique. He is, to me, mesmerizing, Mike. That's really the reason that I watch him. To me, but he's not just a three-point shooter. So that's the beauty of what his game has evolved to be. Well, right?
That's like you say, this is the difference. This is the genesis of, we used to do a segment called East Coast, West Coast. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, Todd and I used to do the show together. We went to college together. We roomed together in college. And we did a segment called East Coast, West Coast. And we would talk about topics and see how people on the West Coast perceive those topics and people on the East Coast perceive those topics. This is a case where you see Curry play much more probably than you see Embiid play, and vice versa for me.
No, it's a great point. Now, they're both superstars, so they're on TV a lot regardless, right? But to your point, on the East Coast, those late-night games, most of the time, you're going to fall asleep before you get to
on the flip side of thing, Embiid's playing for you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right, I'm still working till 5. I mean,
right, exactly. So you don't get to see, like, to me, and we used to battle about the premise of the process, and I say, look at what they got. They landed Joel Embiid. He probably is going to be, if not this year, he will likely win an MVP. That's what they did. So they lost for 2 years to get this player. And now they have a player that you could say is the best player in the entire league. The trade-off would be, well, they could have gone 38-42 that year and got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. Instead, they won 19 games and ended up with this guy. He is now rewarding you for losing those games.
Yes, but I will say this in attack of the process.
Yeah.
They got about 5 picks to figure out and finally hit on Embiid because they're going, what was it? Wiggins. It was name them all off.
Wiggins.
What's that?
They didn't take Wiggins.
Who am I thinking of?
They took Michael Carter Williams.
That's what I was thinking of.
And Nerlens Noel. And then they took Joel Embiid. He was the 3rd pick that they took, and he missed the 2 years.
But my point is, if you're going to be a bad team, if you're a bad team every year and you have the number 1 pick, you're going to hit one time.
No. That's not accurate because the Knicks have had the Sacramento Kings, the Knicks. Now, the Knicks are finally decent this year. I say
that's off a trade to get Randall, really. I mean, right. Randall's their star.
My point is, these teams that are perpetually bad, they're always in the lottery and they can't get out of it because part of the problem with basketball is they're in the draft. There's like 3 guys that make a difference. If you don't get one of those 3 guys, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And look, the Sixers, I'm not saying they did it all right, but the point of it was to you have to have one of those players. Otherwise, you're just playing out the string. We know that.
No, it's true. And look, you've got to build your team. I mean, you've got to have those players around them. It's not a one-man team, but you do have to have a guy. And again, the worry about Embiid was they got him. He was injured. Is he going to be able to really come at a level? And I'll give you credit to that. You watched him I think it was when he wasn't playing yet and he was out on the court. You were at the games watching him and you said, I'm watching this guy. He can't play on the floor yet, but he's out there shooting the ball and everything else. And you said, this guy's a freak.
No, it was his rookie year. He was out there doing stuff. The guy, first off, barely played high school basketball. All right. Played 1 year of college basketball. So he essentially has no experience whatsoever. And he's out there doing stuff. And you're like, this guy's 7'2", 280 pounds, shooting threes, spinning around. The other night, he does a Dirk Nowitzki step back shot. I said, you're literally watching from night to night a combination of 4 different guys. Whatever he feels, it's like the guy who looks in the mirror and tries to emulate a pitcher or somebody. He watches video of these guys and then takes it out to the court. So one night he says, I watch Olajuwon. I want to be Olajuwon. Then another night they're playing Dallas. What does he do? He pulls out a Nowitzki shot. And it's like, how are you stopping that? They play the Knicks. He says he watches Ewing and does Ewing stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's like, I feel like over here almost he's not appreciated as much because we get to see him all the time.
That might be part of it. I mean, but again, how long is the longevity? You going to appreciate it in the moment?
It's a good question.
What do you think? That's the key is you hope. Again, these guys that are so big, there's only a select few that made it long-term careers like a Tim Duncan. These bodies, these knees, these legs, you hope that you're getting a good – what would you be happy with, Mike? Starting today with the guy you have right now, would you be okay with 5 years? 5 years strong? Or would you want more?
Well, let's say this. He has had 4 pretty unbelievable seasons already. Like, you watch those years, you're like, dude, this guy Embiid is something different. This season, he's so much better than the previous 4 seasons that he's played. From this year to last year, it's not even the same guy. He's that much better this year. And he was a great player for the first couple of years of his career. So your question is valid. He's 27 years old. The question is, do I get 4 more of these? Does he keep getting better? Like, this year is so much better than any other season he's had. Agreed. Is the next one better than this one? And if it is, how many more of those keep ascending up? I could say, I guess till he's like, 33? He's 27 now. So that gives you like 5 or 6 more, maybe.
And again, do we look at the game itself, the game of basketball in the NBA? He is doing it differently. The Sixers are still have an up and down game, right? They still got a pretty good, fast-paced game, which you need in this NBA today. they've got the big guy as their focal point. He can pull you out and he can shoot the three. That's huge. But as the game evolves and keeps changing, I get it. They're still playing a little bit of an old school basketball with him being the focal point, but are they going to be able to sustain whatever game plan they have moving forward? Because how's the game going to continue to change? We don't know yet.
Well, that's the thing. And right now, I mean, Tobias Harris is playing at such a high level for him that, you know, for Harris, he's playing way better than he's ever played. But keep in mind, you talk about Curry, the younger brother has added spacing to the floor that they never had before. Danny Green has added more spacing. So Embiid has a lot more room to roam. He doesn't get the same doubles because the court has a lot more space because they do have viable shooters now. So I think that has all added to him as well. You just keep in mind, the guy had very little experience. And I do agree that having Doc Rivers and a new coaching staff, I think Brett Brown, it was time. It was one of those things where they had gotten to where they were going to go. They needed a new voice. These two young guys had the same coach, and they were making the same mistakes, and I felt like it was time. I don't think he was the worst guy in the world like many people do. I feel like the NBA coach, the difference that they make is not in a night-to-night basis. It's in the off-the-court, building confidence, having good communication, and setting the culture of the team. I think the culture needed a tweak.
Well, and that's Doc. And I don't bash on Brett Brown. Look, he was the bridge, and he had to take a lot of stuff during those years he was there, right? He had to deal with the process in the building, and he wasn't going to be successful. But I've always said to you, I know Doc, and he was out here with the Clippers. I know they didn't get to the champion. They didn't get to where they were trying to go.
People criticize Doc because he's the only coach in NBA history to blow 3-3-1 series leads.
But to your point, it's funny how we change the talk. When they blow those 3-1 leads, we want to blame the coach. But normally we say it's a players' league. You win and lose with the players on the court. So he had Kawhi Leonard on the court, right? He had those players. Those players need to take some accountability. I'm not saying he doesn't get any of it, but the point is to you, what you were saying earlier, Mike. Those conversations that we don't hear and we don't see. When he went out to lunch with Embiid before the season even started and said, hey, big guy, you're my guy. And you have the talent. I played in the league. I played with Patrick Ewing. You're better than him. Like, if that's the words that Doc was saying to Embiid, that's what Embiid needed for this next chapter. And I think you've seen him take leaps and bounds.
Oh, I agree. I think another, like Brett Brown, I thought one of the big problems that staff had is he didn't have a good staff. They were young, inexperienced guys on his staff. Doc Rivers brought in Dave Yeager, who was a head coach in Sacramento. He was a head coach in Memphis, a very defensive-minded guy. Sam Cassell was a player that was very high respected. They brought in the coach, I can't remember his name, but he was the defensive coach with the Pacers. So they had a much more veteran staff here that I think, Brett had to be the good cop and the bad cop. Now, Doc could be the good cop, and he's got a veteran staff that can be the bad cop. So you can have that dynamic. I don't think they had a good dynamic of coaches in the past. Brett had to kind of do it all. Not to mention, he also had to put out every fire of the process. Yeah. They put him out there when everything went wrong. And look, it was time to make a change. There's no question about that. And I think you're seeing this team just look, but keep in mind, it all coincides. Well, they're all a year more experienced. They're all a year older. They're all a year more mature. That all plays into it too.
Now, have you heard anything? Because again, I'm on the West Coast. Have you heard any murmurs during the season over there about the relationship, the change in the relationship between Simmons and Embiid? Is it just nobody says anything about it, or it's good or it's bad?
I mean, in fact, Ben was asked about this recently, and he did admit that, it's much better. We're having a lot more fun together. And I think a lot of that is because the roster makeup is way better than it's been. The roster makeup in years past, you had Al Horford out there clunking up 3-point shots. I mean, Josh Richardson, not a good shooter. The roster makeup was not good last year at all. The year before, one of the problems this team constantly had, Todd, was they kept making trades to try to speed up the process because they were bad for so long. They wanted to try to take shortcuts to get good. So they went and got Jimmy Butler. Then they went and got Tobias Harris. And then they made all these trades. So every year you were having 3 different rosters to try to, and it's hard to. That's why I think this net thing is going to be interesting. Are they just going to enter the playoffs, not playing any games together and be like, here we are?
I mean, they have the talent to do that, you would think, but I just don't know. You don't know how they're going to mesh when it comes to it. And what have they played, those 3 guys? 7 games total together?
They're 5-2.
Wow. I mean, that's unbelievable. And again, they're going to err on the side of caution when it comes to the body, the legs of Durant. You want to make sure he's full force. I totally get it. But it is an interesting thought because if you're a Sixers fan, you're going, that's really, I mean, are you guys even thinking about the Bucks in any way? I mean, is that a scary you?
I personally am. I think this Bucks team, look, they were a regular season team the last couple of years. They got to the playoffs. Now I think their focus is forget the regular season. Let's focus on the playoffs.
And and look, I mean, Holiday gets that big contract. I mean, come on, we remember him, don't we?
How funny would it be if Holiday was the guy that knocked you out, the guy that started the whole process?
Oh, man.
All right, that's our time for today. Todd Rank, former Sports Bash co-host. We'll continue to pop him in from time to time, have some debates, have some fun, especially with the NBA playoffs getting here and the NFL draft is on the way. And, of course, baseball is up. We got a lot to dive into here.
On.
All right, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Tell all those fans over there to stay up late and watch that Curry once in a while.
Well, he'll be on at 7 o'clock tonight. I like that. Actually, it's 7:30, I believe. All right. There you go. All right, man. All right. Coming up on the other side, we'll get into a little NFL. Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports, talks NFL with us next. Sports Bash brought to you by Dorothy Gale Roofing. No place like your home. If you have a leak or need a new roof, call Dorothy Gale, 877-97-KEVIN. Or online, DorothyGaleRoofing.com. All right, coming up, a little NFL. Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports NFL conversation like no other. We'll do it Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And if you're watching the show live on the live video stream, there's Geoff. Geoff, what's going on, man?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Everything is good. We are 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away, I guess, from the NFL draft, but a lot to dive into. But I want to get your take on something. Ron Jaworski was on Sunday morning here on 97.3 ESPN on our locker room show. He said this about the Eagles' offensive line situation. I want to get your take.
I don't think left tackle is a bigger problem than most people do. I look at the tape, and I thought, the guys played well at the left tackle position.
All right, left tackle position. Your thoughts on that? He says, I watched the tape. I don't think they have a problem at left tackle.
I honestly don't think they have a problem at left tackle either. I mean, Jordan Mailata is more than capable of starting on about 20 NFL teams right now. If you look at the left tackle situation for the Eagles, I would probably rank them maybe between 8th and 12th, and that's really good considering how little good left tackles there are in this league. So we're going around here. I would rank Jordan Mailata probably about 13 through 15, which, again, that isn't bad considering he's only played, about 12 to 16 games in his career thus far. I think he's more than capable of getting better. He's only 23 years old. He's going to get better as time goes on. And you still have Andre Dillard as a capable backup. So in my mind, left tackle isn't an issue for the Eagles at all.
Yeah, I'm interested in that whole battle. If I'm Philly, so my question for you, Geoff, is on draft day at 12, let's say things don't go your way and like Rashawn Slater's the guy on the board, and the 2 corners are gone, the 3 receivers are gone. Do you take the offensive lineman, or do you say, no, we got a pretty solid offensive line here? Let Dillard and Mailata battle at the left tackle. I know I got some injuries and some age, but if those guys are healthy, this unit's pretty good. Do you look at the line at 12 if things don't go your way in the first 11 picks?
Are we assuming Micah Parsons is gone too?
No, he would be there.
I would take Micah Parsons. Forget about the offensive line.
You think they would do that?
I don't think they'll do it, but they should do it. I'm trying to be smart here. When I do all these mock drafts, I try to make the best possible pick for teams, and Micah Parsons is the best possible pick for them. They don't have that many linebackers outside of Eric Wilson, and I mean, really, they don't have anything outside of him and Singleton. It's we all know what their third round pick from last year is. It's how bad is it that I forget his name? The kid from Colorado.
Davion Taylor.
Davion Taylor. That's it. See, that's how little I know about Davion Taylor. I don't even know his name. It's actually really bad.
He wasn't very memorable.
No, I think he played like 4 total snaps the entire year. He wasn't good on special teams when he played. It was just not a good situation for them. So I would take Micah Parsons at 12.
Yeah.
But it's hard to pass on a Rashad Slater or a Christian Darrisaw there if they're there, because they could be franchise left tackles for you. And if you don't think Jordan Mailata is the answer, a guy you traded to get into the 7th round for a couple years ago, and you spent all this time, why not? But at the same time, we have to look at this rationally here. The Eagles do not have a problem at left tackle. If anything, they may have an abundance of left tackles, and they may trade one of them. Maybe Andre Dillard's the guy they trade.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to close the book on Dillard either. I mean, I don't have much information on Dillard. I mean, from all accounts, in training camp last year, Geoff, they liked what they saw from Dillard enough to say, you're the guy. Jason Peters, we're not even going to think about putting you back there because Dillard, we liked him enough. So I don't think it's fair to write him off either. So I have no problem with them saying, Dillard, Mailata, you are battling for left tackle. And I am certainly, when I have the opportunity to draft this high, I am certainly not going to take it and say, I want a 3rd tackle in that left tackle battle.
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with it if they decide to do that. But again, you would have to trade a guy like Andre Dillard if you're going to draft a left tackle. And here's the thing, if they do draft a tackle, I'm thinking the future of Lane Johnson here. How long is Lane Johnson going to be healthy? He says he's healthy. He says he's going to be good to go. But
he told me he wants to play till he's 40.
Yeah, and he can. I'm not going to deny that, but Ryan also wanted to play that long too, and we saw how quickly he declined after 2008 with the Eagles. He went with the Chargers for 1 year, and that was it. And he went to play for a long time. Jason Peters is basically playing until he's 40. I'm not against it, but that just seems like too much of a. I don't even want to say a risk because it's a safe pick, but it's a risk for them because they're a bad football team. But that's one of the positions they're strong at. I think their offensive line is actually a lot better than people give it credit for right now.
And Jaws, one of the things he said in that conversation was, if healthy, Brooks and Johnson, if they come back healthy, that you go from having a disastrous offensive line to having one of the best offensive lines in football all of a sudden. And, Geoff, if you end up having a good offensive line, don't the fortunes of the team change pretty quickly?
Yeah, all of a sudden, Jalen Hurts doesn't have to run for his life, and he doesn't have to do these one-read moves where, I'm going to take off because I got whoever blocking in front of me. You got an all-pro and Jason Kelce, who's a borderline Hall of Famer, and you got Brandon Brooks, arguably the best right guard in football when he's healthy. You got Lane Johnson there. That's a pretty good right side of the offensive line. Oh, by the way, let's not forget Isaac Seumalo, who is actually a pretty good left guard. He's turned into a decent player. Jeff Stoutland as your offensive line coach, I gotta believe they're going to develop Jordan Mailata. I gotta believe they're going to develop Andre Dillard. Why mess with it? If you do anything in this draft with offensive line, you get depth, and that's it.
And Geoff, that's I bring this up a couple times, but I want to get your take on it. The fact that they had that disastrous year in 2012. The line had 4 starters hurt. Chip Kelly gets hired. He gets those linemen back. They draft Lane Johnson. They go from 4 wins to 10. Could a good offensive line spring that kind of turnaround?
In this division, it can, because the NFC East, let's face it, they're not any good. And the Eagles need their offensive line.
They're getting better.
Yeah, they need everybody on deck because you got that Washington front. I call them a front seven, but I guess Ryan Kerrigan's gone now. But you still have Chase Young to worry about. You got Montez Sweat. You got Deron Payne. You got Jonathan Allen. You have a lot of guys to worry about on that Washington front. So you need all those guys healthy. Dallas, I think they're really going to miss Aldon Smith as a football player. It seems like Aldon Smith's in trouble right now, but
he just signed with Seattle, right?
Yeah, he did, but now I guess he's in trouble with the whole. He's wanted in Louisiana for something. I didn't even get into the full details of that, but yeah, I mean Dallas is going to miss him as a football player because he was their most productive defensive end last year. And then you got the Giants, who. This is the team I really don't want to get Micah Parsons, even though I know they're going to, because they already have a really good defense, and you add him into the mix. Patrick Graham's going to be an NFL head coach someday. So, yes, you need this offensive line fully healthy. This is your one chance to kind of take back a couple wins in the NFC East. That's why I think the over-under for the Eagles is 7, according to William Hill, because they're in a terrible division.
Yeah, I mean, Washington's interesting. The defense is really good. They have a quarterback who can win games with Fitzpatrick. I'm very interested to see what they do at 19. Do they try to move up and get a quarterback? Do they stick there and get that second, level of wide receiver, the Bateman, like that next group? They're a very intriguing team for me on draft day. And you just said the Giants. The Giants are a team that their defense was solid last year, but they didn't have that standout player. If they get a Parsons, that defense becomes kind of interesting. So I think the teams in the NFC East, and then Dak Prescott's back, that changes the dynamic. So the NFC East is getting more interesting.
It is. And to me, I got Dallas winning the division right now as of, April 19th, because Dak Prescott is their quarterback, and I don't trust Daniel Jones. I trust Ryan Fitzpatrick to an extent, but he is 39 years old. I didn't know this today. Ryan Fitzpatrick has more career rushing yards than Alex Smith. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I was looking up career rushing yards for quarterbacks when I was doing Alex Smith, and I saw Ryan Fitzpatrick's name pop up ahead of him. So that's kind of weird. But yeah, I don't trust him. I don't trust him all the time, I should say. I probably trust him more as a backup. Daniel Jones, I don't know what the Giants see in him. I just don't think the guy's any good. I think.
Well, could they surprise everybody at 11 then if there's a quarterback there and say, you know what, we didn't think there would be one here, but there's one here, so we'll take him.
I'll laugh. I'll be on this feed and just laugh if the Giants take a quarterback because they have full confidence in Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones is going to be the next great quarterback. And according to Dave Gettleman, and if they do that, that just shows you how much faith they truly have in the guy. I really think they're just going to load up at the skill positions and basically say, we're going to give you, this is your final chance. We're going to give you all these players because you didn't have anybody last year. Golden Tate was supposed to be your go-to receiver, and he was terrible for them. They still had Darius Slayton. They got Kenny Golladay. They're probably going to have to add another receiver. Evan Ingram, I don't know how he made the Pro Bowl last year, but he did. So I don't think he's good. Really, if there's any team, we're talking about offensive line, there's any team that needs to add an offensive lineman right now, it's the New York Football Giants. They need one in the worst way.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports NFL writer, covers the NFL. When you look at Jalen Reagor, I know I'm not saying that you've made a decision on him, but if you had to, somebody said, Jeff, tell me what Jalen Reagor is. Can he play or no?
I say he can play. I honestly think he can play. I thought he could play from week 1 last year when he caught that bomb from Carson Wentz, and Wentz missed him on a couple other passes early in the year. But if we remember correctly, that thumb injury was from an errant Wentz ball, and that kind of slowed his whole rookie season. And we didn't have OTAs. We didn't have training camp. I didn't think that was that great for a rookie with no preseason. And he kind of came in there, and look, I think Doug Peterson wasn't creative enough with him. I think that was part of the problem. So to me, I think as of right now, I think the kid can play. I think Jalen Reagor's got a lot of speed. I think Nick Sirianni is going to use him to, pretty much his skill set. He can catch a lot of short passes, bubble screens. I see a lot of them in Jalen Reagor's future. I see him going downfield. Is he a number 1 receiver? No, I don't think he's going to be that. I think you need to add one of those top 3 receivers with him. But man, Jalen Reagor could be a number 2 in this offense, and Jalen Hurts has a little bit of a connection with him. Look, that first-round pick isn't going to be as bad as everybody thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I am intrigued by Reagor. I thought, he was in a tough spot last year with the injury. You've talked about the lack of OTAs. Everybody had the lack of OTAs, but it didn't help that you had that, and then you got hurt, started late. And by the way, the quarterback was horrific last year. I want to ask you this, and we'll get out on this tonight. Jeff will be back on Wednesday. We'll do Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at this time. Talk NFL. We'll spin around the league. We'll do a lot of NFC East. We'll do a lot of league stuff. But how much the Eagles needed to scale back and simplify the offense for 2 reasons. One, the constant shuffling of the offensive line, and how bad Carson Wentz was last year.
I think they had to go to a basic offense, something they would probably do in April and May. They were doing in November and December because that's how bad Wentz was. And this is why I got so upset with the whole Wentz thing. That Cleveland game, he should have been benched. Bottom line, it just wasn't working out. And when you got a guy back there and Jalen Hurts, I just didn't like how they went back to square one with him and just didn't work out. Bottom line, with all the reshuffle on the offensive line, and look, I'll defend Carson Wentz on this. He had like 12 different offensive line combinations in the first 13 weeks of the season. I get that. I understand that. But he's also a fifth-year quarterback. He shouldn't be turning the football over as much as he has. He lost complete confidence in his ability to throw the football. Once Travis Fulgham teams started covering him, Carson was like, that's it. I'm done. So you're worried about that. You had to reshape pretty much everything on your offensive line. Zach Ertz was playing terrible.
Are you a believer in Fulgham?
Yeah, I need to see more. I honestly do. I think he's not as good as the 5-game stretch he showed, but he's not as bad as he showed the rest of the year. I think he is a project. I think he's a guy that in 2021, a rebuilding year for them, you play him. I don't understand the whole Doug Peterson flaw. I'd love to pick Doug Peterson's brain on this. Did this guy just not try? Did he just not practice hard? Did he think his crap didn't stink? I don't know. That's what I want to see out of Travis Fulgham. And I mean, the guy I did a by the numbers piece on him last year when he was in his 5-game stretch at the bye week. He was like one of the top 3, top 4 receivers in football based on all the numbers.
For that 4-week stretch, he was unbelievable.
He can't be this bad. And look, I know we've seen this before with the Eagles. I mean, Reggie Brown looked really good at one point. Christy Jones looked like he was going to be a superstar wide receiver in 1997. That just never, ever happened. So maybe that's the same thing with Travis Fulgham, but I'm not really ready to give up on this kid yet. I think he can be something in here. I think he can be kind of an Alshon Jeffrey, a possession receiver. I think he can be a really good red zone threat for this football team. And there's going to be competition here. Maybe he'll be better off if you add Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. Maybe you trade up and get Jamar Chase. Who knows? But
my last quick question. I want to get this in. Which of Waddle or Smith complements Reagor best?
Oh, man. I would probably go Jalen Waddle because I think you can use Rager underneath, and you can use Waddle in that Tyreek Hill role. He could be that deep threat for you. Instead of making Jalen Rager the deep threat, let's make Jalen Rager the underneath, the slot receiver guy. The guy who can catch passes and get a lot of yards after the catch. And I think that's where Jalen Waddle really bet. I mean, the guy I think would have been perfect is Jamar Chase. But if you had to go between Smith or Waddle, I'm going Waddle.
All right, there we go. Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports, at Geoff Kerr, CBS. He'll be back on Wednesday. More NFL conversation, getting you ready for the draft, the offseason, and, of course, all things NFL here on the Sports Best. All right, Geoff, good stuff, buddy.
Thanks, Mike. 10 more days, my friend.
I don't know if I'm happy about that or not. I love talking draft, and when it's here, I'm going to be sad when it's gone.
Yeah, same here.
All right, man. I'll talk to you Wednesday. Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, when we come back, we will wrap up the show. We got a lot to finish up here. The sound of the day. Sound of the day is coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Hey, but first, I want to tell you about DraftKings, the Masvidal-Usman fight this weekend. The last time, it was tremendous, right? He had a great fight. Usman wins. But this time, Masvidal has a full training camp to get ready for the fight. How will it all shake out? DraftKings Sportsbook. You can bet this fight. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook and get the odds on this particular fight. It's this Saturday night. Use my code 973. Use the code 973. Use the code 973 this weekend for Masvidal and Usman. And, of course, Saturday night. Check it out live. I couldn't believe when I heard this fight was this weekend. I'm actually like, wait, what? This weekend? Huh? Yeah. So check that out on the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use my code 973. We got that, and plus watch the rest of the card, which is fantastic. We'll talk more about it later on in the week. All right, coming up, we got the sound of the day coming up next. All right, time now for the sound of the day. But first, before we get you there, I want to tell you about my friends over at Trifecta Therapeutics. I've been telling you about getting the nice weather. And what the nice weather means, we're getting outside. They're in Glassboro. So if you're tired of being in pain, you're outside, you've been doing things that maybe you haven't done for the whole winter. The team of the highest trained docs at Trifecta Therapeutics can help you get pain-free. They take their clients using cutting-edge equipment, treatment plans, and methods to get you feeling better, playing better, and, of course, staying better. Best part is you don't need a script, and you can start today. Trifecta Therapeutics. They help the pros and the Joes to get the best. Schedule your free discovery session today. Use the code ESPN Radio at trifectatherapeutics.com. That's trifectatherapeutics.com. All right, let's see what we got today, as we had a lot of good guests, a lot of good things today, but this one, how about this? Geoff Mosher today. We talked a lot recently right there with Jeff Kerr about Mailata and the Eagles' offensive line. Ron Jaworski said this weekend, but Mosher, he added this comment to the conversation about the Eagles' offensive line.
Driscoll, 4th round out of Auburn, is going to wind up being a starter for them. If not by the end of this year, then certainly the start of the next year. He's a kid that Jeff Stoutland took to immediately. Liked, if you remember, he started the season opener at right tackle when Lane Johnson got hurt, ahead of Matt Pryor. So they really felt that Driscoll has good potential.
All right, so Jeff Driscoll, another guy, talking to Moshe, we got into this offensive line thing. Jeff Kerr, we got into this offensive line thing because of what Jaw said this weekend. I thought, hey, here's another guy who agrees with me about this offensive line. I think the Eagles' offensive line could be maybe one of the best in the league, and they have depth.
You can't hold against an entire team a plethora of injuries and then just say they can't play. Like, how am I supposed to determine how good you are if you're not on the field? When they're on the field, they're pretty darn good. And Driscoll showed you when he was on the field, he was pretty darn good, especially for a rookie being thrown into some really difficult situations.
So people would counter and say, so why was their line so bad if people like Driscoll, if people like Herbig?
Because they were hurt. Nobody was healthy except for Kelsey for what, 90% of the games?
Well, I think it was more that Herbig was playing and then the guy next to him changed. And then they had to move Herbig to the other side, and the guy next to him changed over there. And then they had to move him back. I think individually, Herbig and Driscoll played pretty well. As a unit, though, the team suffered because they didn't have the same players.
There was no continuity.
Yeah. So individually, I thought Driscoll of that group was the best. I thought Herbig played well early. I thought he struggled a little bit in the middle. And towards the end, I think they kind of lost confidence in him. But to me, he is the guy that can be that swing guard. He can play the two guard sides. I think Driscoll could be. Now, don't be surprised if Driscoll is a factor in other areas on the line as well.
Listen, he can be this era of the Eagles. Todd Harriman's a guy who starts you for multiple years at guard and tackle.
That's a good comparison there. All right, what about this possibility?
The thing about Rashawn Slater from Northwestern, Mike, is that at 300. The thing about Rashawn Slater from Northwestern, Mike, is that at 303 pounds, he's a guy that can play pretty much any position on the offensive line. I've had two teams tell me that he could play center in the NFL because he's that athletic and that skilled. And because he's a little bit short-armed, it might be better. It's just that you wouldn't want to draft a guy top 12, right, and then immediately start him at center, but maybe something later in his career. But you could move him to guard or tackle. And so I don't think it's a wasted pick.
So he's saying, look, if Slater's there at 12, and the scenario that we had brought up the other day about all these guys that you hope, they're all gone, then what? Would you take Rashawn Slater?
It's an interesting question because as multiple have mentioned here, the Eagles have a history of going offensive line. So, do the Eagles just go the safe play and say, let's go with what we know and what we have success at drafting in the first round instead of trying to get too cute?
If you told me I took Slater over Sewell, I would be okay with that for the reason that he said, versatility. To me, Sewell, you're drafted to be your left tackle.
Correct.
Slater, hey, I need you to play right guard this year because Brandon Brooks got hurt. I need you to play left guard this year because Sayamala got hurt. I need you to play right tackle because, I feel that his versatility adds much more to what this team needs than just getting Penei Sewell and saying, you're going to be my left tackle, because I feel like I got 2 left tackles.
Right.
Paul Hudrick was on. He said this.
Closest kind of historical comp would be like Hakeem Olajuwon. And that's saying an awful lot because Hakeem Olajuwon was unbelievable in his prime with the way he could play both, two-way, so much skill. And I'm sure if big men shot the 3 ball in Hakeem's day, I'm sure he would have stepped out there and taken it more.
Now, we talked a lot about Embiid today and how special of a season and who we compare him to. Hakeem Olajuwon, Dirk Nowitzki, I say he's like 5 guys rolled into one.
Yeah, and I think that it's time people start appreciating Embiid more instead of complaining about him. Oh, they always find something to complain about, and it's like, how about you just appreciate what we're watching? He's amazing.
Few do.
He's amazing to watch.
He's a ton of fun. I say right now, he's the most fun player in the league to watch. That's my opinion. It's a big man. It's a small shooters league, and he is excelling in a league that is not built for him. All right, game night's up next. Kevin McCormick with an update on the Sixers and the Warriors. Who's in and who's out? There's a lot of people on that list. Could we see the debut of George Hill tonight? We'll have that tonight at 6:40 during game night, which is coming up next.